Chapter 408. There were all kinds of people in the tea house, and it was a must-visit place. Before the waiter's tea was served, wonderful news had already flown in from all over. Hey, have you heard? Some time ago, His Majesty invited a master from somewhere. Now, he's living in a Buddhist temple. Every 3 days, he has to go to the palace to recite sutras. Rumor has it that His Majesty wants to clear his mind and restrain his desires. But some people say that this master is there to catch demons. A bearded man dressed in gray took a bite of a large sesame seed cake and said mysteriously to the person sitting beside him. Before the person sitting next to the burly man could say anything, a scholarly person at another table exclaimed in surprise, "Monster? Brother, it's broad daylight. Can you not scare people? People don't talk about strange things." The man tore off a piece of sesame seed cake and threw it into his mouth. His eyes were full of disdain for the scholar. "You rotten scholars who only know how to talk nonsense. I heard this news from those officials. Say, how many small countries did His Majesty trample over in the past? How could he suddenly believe in Buddhism? Thinking about it, it's a bit strange. Wow, big ice cube. Does Jiang country have so much freedom of speech? Aren't you worried that you'll be arrested in the name of the emperor for talking nonsense?" Chu Qingyan was surprised. Hearing Chu Qingyan's doubts, Yiling Feng smiled and said disapprovingly, "Jiang country has a free culture and freedom of speech. As long as you don't go overboard, no one will pay attention to you." "So open, that's good." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but praise. That scholar didn't say anything because of the man's murderous look. Presumably, he also felt that what the man said made sense. Someone heard the man and scholar's conversation and whispered, "Sister, I heard that the master is very young. He doesn't seem to be in his 20s yet. He has a dignified appearance. The last time I saw him on the street, I felt that it was a pity that such a man entered Buddhism." A woman's voice cut in, "I've seen the Buddhist monk you're talking about. Immaculately dressed, with a dignified appearance. If I were to use something to describe him, I can only think of the noble and proud Buddhist lotus." After saying that, the girls cupped their faces and became infatuated. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but widen her eyes as she listened to their descriptions. Not even 20 years old, but a Buddhist monk with a dignified appearance. Buddhist lotus? She formed an image in her mind. Su Jian. Impossible. Wasn't he in Sichuan? How could he appear here? Chu Qingyan immediately dispelled this guess. At this time, Yiling Feng opened his mouth. "I've also heard of His Majesty inviting this master. At that time, I was just about to pick you up, so I didn't pay much attention to him. But to be honest, that big man's words are somewhat reasonable. His Majesty fought on the battlefield in his early years, and his hands were covered in blood. If he invited a monk to recite sutras, it's simply a rumor because this reason sounds too far-fetched." "What's the reason? Is it really a ghost hunt?" Duguqing asked curiously. Yiling Feng glanced at her. "Do you believe in ghosts and gods in this world?" Duguqing subconsciously shook her head. Then, she realized that he was despising her and couldn't help but glare at him. Chu Qingyan, who was at the side, heard Yiling Feng's question and remained silent. Actually, in the modern world, she also didn't believe in ghosts and gods in this world. But when she transmigrated, she began to suspect that there were some things that science couldn't answer. "Has anything happened in the Jiang Kingdom's palace recently?" Xiao Su suddenly asked. Yiling Feng carefully recalled and gently patted the folding fan in his hand. "Other than the assassination a few days ago, there shouldn't be anything else. The servants reported that the assassin hasn't been found yet. The imperial capital is still under martial law. But this incident happened after the monk was invited, so it shouldn't have anything to do with the monk. Ling Feng, think of a way to investigate the reason for the monk's invitation and who the assassin's target is." With his sharp senses as a politician, Xiao Su felt that these two incidents seemed unrelated, but his intuition told him that they were inextricably linked. "Okay, I'll get someone to pay attention and see if they can find the problem." Yiling Feng nodded. After all, this was the imperial capital of the Jiang Kingdom. Unlike Sichuan and Junlan, there were no Xiao Su's men here. Moreover, they weren't familiar with the Jiang Kingdom. His men couldn't act rashly. If they touched the interests or taboos of those people, their hearts would be exposed. Think about it. The lord of another country appeared in their territory. What kind of unspeakable secret could there be? Even if there wasn't, they were all experts in strategy. Even if there wasn't, they would still come up with something just in case. If their identities were exposed, it would be harmful to them. As soon as Ling Feng finished speaking, the people at the table next to him began to whisper. By the way, did you see our crown prince and second prince at the sacrificial ceremony a few days ago? Guest A asked the person beside him. Yes, we saw them. The sacrificial ceremony is held once a year. Even if we have important things to do, we have to put it aside. That's an opportunity for us people to see the emperor, empress, and princes. If we miss it, we can only wait for the next year, Guestby said excitedly, as if he could make a fortune just by seeing them once. I saw it too. Our crown prince is still so peerless. It's really a blessing for the people of the Jiang Kingdom to have such a crown prince. Guest C stroked his beard and said with a flushed face. Yes, our emperor is really good at raising children. His Highness the Crown Prince is diligent in government affairs. His Highness the Second Prince is gentle and polite. They are brothers who are respectful to each other, unlike in other countries where brothers are at odds with each other. I'm really glad that we are under the leadership of His Majesty and not born in another country. Guest A sighed. When Chu Qingyan heard their discussion, she felt some admiration for the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. He should be a wise king to be loved and respected by the people to this extent. Out of the corner of her eye, she inadvertently glanced at the person beside her. His face was as still as water, and there was a touch of sadness in his eyes that one could not detect if one did not look carefully. Chu Qingyan was stunned. Then she understood. She lowered her eyes, and her heart was also a little heavy. People would feel indignant because there was a comparison. When the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom and the Sichuan Emperor were compared, it was clear who was better and who was inferior at a glance. If the Emperor of the Sichuan Kingdom was even slightly better than the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom, then Big Ice Cube would not have to wander in a foreign land. Unfortunately, everything was already set. The Sichuan Emperor would not become the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. Chu Qingyan raised her hand and covered his hand. When he turned to look at her, she said pitifully, Big Ice Cube, I'm cold. Lend me some of your body heat. He could not help but shake his head when he heard that. She was wearing so much, and she was still cold. As expected, her body was still weak. He did not answer. Instead, he turned his hand and put her hand into his. When that hand obediently clasped in his palm, his heart calmed down for no reason. Su Yi's vexing worries just now disappeared like smoke. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and smiled. She was not cold. She was just afraid that he would be cold and his heart would be cold. At this moment, a voice attracted Chu Qingyan's attention. Chapter 409. When everyone was praising the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom and the two princes, a voice suddenly rang out. By the way, have you seen the third princess? A handsome young man asked. The third princess? Everyone was stunned by the question and then shook their heads. Customer C said to the young man, the third princess hasn't participated in the ceremony from last year to this year's ceremony. This old man misses the third princess very much. She doesn't have the airs of a princess and treats people gently. I heard that last year, a child ran under her imperial chariot. She immediately ordered people to stop the carriage and carried the child out before continuing on. She said that it didn't matter if the auspicious hour was delayed. Back then, this old man was successfully convinced by the third princess. Our third princess really has a bodhisattva's heart. Yes, our third princess is so kind. It's a pity that she met a bad man. Customer D turned around and discussed with everyone. Why do you say that the third princess met a bad man? Chu Qingyan, who was listening to everyone's discussion, couldn't help but ask when they didn't get to the point after a long time. As soon as Chu Qingyan spoke, those people all turned to look at her. The hostility in their eyes was obvious, as if Chu Qingyan had asked a very wrong question. Chu Qingyan was a little innocent. She only asked a question and didn't do anything evil. Why was everyone looking at her with gritted teeth? Ling Feng, who was on the side, immediately tried to smooth things over. "Everyone, I'm sorry. This is my distant cousin's first time in the imperial capital. She doesn't know what happened. Please don't take offense." Only then did those people withdraw the hostility in their eyes. "Customer," A said with a smile. "That's fine. After all, that was last year. The little girl is still young. It's normal that she doesn't know." Chu Qingyan immediately acted like a child. "What happened last year? Can you tell me?" As soon as she finished speaking, the handsome young man answered with a somewhat unpleasant expression. "This matter has to be told from a long time ago." Looking at his long-winded speech, Chu Qingyan immediately pulled the pastries in front of her closer to herself and prepared to listen to what he had to say. The origin of the story was like this. The intelligent and beautiful third princess had a crush on the second young Master Tang, the prime minister of the Jiang kingdom. This was a secret that everyone in the kingdom knew. Because the royal family only had these 3 children, their every move was watched by the common people. The third princess was His Majesty's treasure, and he loved her far more than the crown prince and the second prince. Everyone's eyes fell on her. No one knew how it got out, but the third princess had developed feelings for her childhood sweetheart, second young Master Tang. She had never hidden her feelings for him. The emperor of the Jiang kingdom and Prime Minister Tang also seemed to think highly of this pair of children and had never interfered with their relationship. Later, when the third princess was of marriageable age, which was in the early spring of last year, His Majesty decreed a marriage and betrothed the third princess to second young Master Tang. Everyone thought that this was a good match and made a good story. However, in the early summer of last year, when the two of them were just one step away from the wedding ceremony, the third princess suddenly lifted the veil and broke off the engagement. This matter greatly damaged the Tang family's reputation and also caused them to lose face. However, His Majesty of the Jiang Kingdom did not blame the third princess because of this. Instead, he rewarded the Tang family with many things and ordered the imperial court not to talk about this matter. However, the gossipy common people had already spread the news. Why did the engagement break off? Didn't they say that the two of them were a match made in heaven? Chu Qingyan was obviously so engrossed in the story that she even forgot to eat the pastry in her hand. That second young Master Tang must have done something to let the third princess down. Otherwise, how could such a kind and lovely third princess do something like breaking off the engagement? Guest A said angrily. "That's right. The third princess is such a noble person. If she was willing to marry second young Master Tang, the Tang family would be laughing in their sleep. However, this kind of thing just had to happen at this juncture. Other than second young Master Tang doing something to let the princess down, we can't think of any other reason." Guest C snorted coldly. Although it had been a year and a half, this matter seemed to have happened just yesterday. This was because these guests looked very agitated, as if they wanted to skin second young Master Tang alive. However, it could be seen that the third princess was very popular among the common people. She unilaterally broke off the engagement, but no one stood out to criticize her. Instead, they stood on her side and scolded second young Master Tang as a heartless man. It was obvious that these people had successfully become fans of the third princess, and they were also brainless fans. What about the third princess now? Chu Qingyan felt that she couldn't judge the truth just based on their side of the story. Although she had a strong curiosity about the third princess just by listening to the common people's comments, she still wanted to collect information from other sources. The handsome young man who told the whole story was obviously also a brainless fan of the third princess. When he heard this question, he became dejected. Ever since the third princess left the imperial palace that time, she hasn't left. Even when the nobles usually hold banquets and invite her to appear, she didn't accept. Thinking about it, we haven't heard any news about the third princess for a year and a half. We miss her very much. That's right. It's all second young Master Tang's fault. Otherwise, our third princess would often go out of the imperial palace. My wife said that she once sold 5 kernel cakes to the third princess. Not only did the third princess give her enough money, she also gave my wife a jade bracelet. We plan to treat that jade bracelet as a family heirloom and pass it down from generation to generation. Guestby said with pride. Old man Lu, what does that bracelet look like? Show it to us. Someone jeered. That's right. We also want to see what the bracelet worn by the third princess looks like. Another person continued. I don't want it. Once I take it out, it will be snatched away by you. I'm not that stupid. Gatsby looked nervous and regretted saying this. Chu Qingyan saw that the topic was diverted, so she didn't ask anything more, because these people knew almost everything. Young Master Yi, is what they said just now true? Why do I feel that it's strange that someone didn't mention the one who broke off the engagement? Did they make a mistake? Chu Qingyan couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. She was inferring according to common sense. Yi Feng shrugged. There is indeed such a thing, but I'm not very sure why the public opinion is all on second young Master Tang. I only know that when the third princess broke off the engagement, second young Master Tang didn't come out to explain anything. Also, I heard that someone spoke ill of the third princess behind her back and was beaten up by him. But it's all rumors. Just treat it as a story. Chu Qingyan squeezed the pastry in her hand slightly. Seeing that her fingertips were deeply embedded in the soft, glutinous rice, she smiled mysteriously. No, I think that the more inexplicable something is, the more valuable it is to dig into it. This is very likely to be a breakthrough. She tilted her head and asked the person beside her, Big Ice Cube, what do you think? There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Xiao Su said. Chapter 410. They sat in the tea house for a while and then went back home. Originally, Chu Qingyan wanted to walk around for a while longer. Unfortunately, those young ladies who knew about Yi Feng's return surrounded their table, making it hard for them to advance or retreat. If they continued to walk around, they could imagine how chaotic the journey would be. In the end, everyone decided to return. As soon as they entered the mansion, Yi Feng asked Xiao Su angrily without caring about his image. Brother, did you do all this? At this time, he did not care about his image. The folding fan in his hand was torn, a sleeve of the best Su-embroidered clothes was missing, and the boots that were clean and tidy when he went out had several footprints on them. Without looking in the mirror, he could imagine that his hair was like a chicken's nest. Young Master Yi, who had been wandering in the flower world for so many years, had never been so down and out like today. Along the way, many people looked at him and laughed, but no one thought that he was Yi Feng, who was famous in the capital for his handsome appearance. Today, he had lost a lot of face. I don't understand what you were talking about. His voice rose at the end, indicating that he was in a good mood. Yi Feng took a deep breath and chanted several times in his heart, Don't be angry. Then he brushed the hair that was scattered in front of his forehead and roared calmly, You bastard, tell me the truth. Did you reveal my whereabouts? I just stepped into the capital, and someone followed me, saying that no one deliberately spread the news. I don't believe it. And who else knows about my return except for you? It had to be said that someone who could make the self-proclaimed gentle and elegant young master so angry had crossed his bottom line. But would Xiao Su care? No, he was happy to see it happen. So what if it was me? Xiao Su sat down in the middle of the hall. He was dressed in a black robe with golden edges of maple leaves. His every movement was leisurely, without the slightest trace of regret. Xiao Su, you are haggling over every little thing. I just schemed against you once. Why are you so serious? Xiao Su's unhurried voice made Yi Tianyan jump up and down, not caring about his image at all. I'm just haggling over every penny. You don't have to take it seriously. Xiao Su successfully provoked Yi Feng again by talking about rich girls. Compared to his good friend's unbridled elegance, he himself was down and out. He was worse than a beggar in the corner. Yi Feng felt his anger burn, but he couldn't do anything to him. He could only sigh and go down to change his clothes. He couldn't parade around in such tattered clothes. If he wanted to settle the score, there was plenty of time. Yi Feng left angrily. When he passed by Dugu Qing, he heard her gritting her teeth and adding insult to his injury. Serves you right. You reap what you sow. He clenched his fists and left without saying a word. Chu Qingyan, who had watched Yi Feng explode, could not help but give her big iceberg a thumbs up. She said generously, Well done. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows, accepting her praise. Without Yi Feng, Dugaching felt bored and left. Father Chu carried the pastries he bought along the way to share them with his wife. Only Xiao Su, Chu Qingyan, and Turin Huling were left in the hall. The atmosphere of laughter faded away. Chu Qingyan sat on the side, holding a teacup in her hand. Her expression was a bit distant. Although they left in a hurry today and some accidents happened on the way, they still collected a lot of information. One was that Jiang country's emperor invited a senior monk to recite scriptures in the palace. The meaning was unclear. Another was that Jiang country's palace was infiltrated by an assassin a few days ago. The assassin's whereabouts were still unknown. Another was that Jiang country's third princess did not step out of the palace gate for a year and a half. It was as if she had disappeared. There were many suspicious points about the annulment of the engagement. Although these three matters sounded insignificant, for this impregnable Jiang country's imperial capital, these matters were already rare clues. Clues? They were not here to solve the case. Instead, they wanted to find out the information they wanted from a secure place. They had to find a breakthrough and then unravel it bit by bit. It was only a rumor that the ice crystal flower was in Jiang country's imperial palace. However, they wanted to confirm whether Jiang country's emperor really had the ice crystal flower. In Jiang country, except for Yi Lingfeng, they were isolated and helpless. Everything in Jiang country was strange to them. Master, our people have started to take action. Now the focus is on brothels, tea houses, and casinos. Let's see if we can find out any information about the ice crystal flower from these places. Turin stood in front of his master and said seriously. Jiang country used the blue impatiens as its national flower, so the people preferred blue. Then, they brought this hobby into their daily lives. For example, blue decorations, blue clothes, and blue buildings were everywhere. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. In order to better blend into Jiang country's imperial capital and make it easier for them to gather information, Turin was wearing a blue ice silk robe. His usual serious expression seemed to have added some youthful vigor to it. On the other hand, Huling was wearing a light blue calamus-patterned robe. His usual smiling face had faded away from his usual lively temperament. He added, "We don't have a topographic map of Jiang country's imperial palace. It's not good to rashly investigate at night. This subordinate has asked young Master E to help us to see if we can get a map. This subordinate plans to search the imperial palace when the time is right. It would be best if we can find the ice crystal flower. If not, we will cross off the imperial palace as our target." Huling and Turin's plan was also to prepare for a rainy day. One focused on investigating the imperial capital, while the other focused on the imperial palace. The ice crystal flower was a rare, medicinal herb. It had been extinct for decades. Its most recent whereabouts was in Jiang country's imperial palace. No matter what, they would not let go of any suspicious clues. What if the ice crystal flower is not in Jiang country's imperial capital? Although she did not want to say this hypothesis, it was better to be safe than sorry. Turin and Huling were silent. They had also considered this possibility. Water Spirit has already asked Xiao Lai cavalry to search the various countries. If there is any news, they will send it over. Xiao Su knew her worries. However, it was hard to say whether this method of searching for a needle in a haystack would succeed. Not wanting the big ice cube to be affected by her emotions, Chu Qingyan forced a smile and said, "Don't be afraid. Xiao Lai cavalry is so powerful. They will definitely find it. Not only the ice crystal flower, but also the love grass." Chu Qingyan clenched her fists. They were already in Jiang country. There were still 40 days left. They would definitely be able to find it. Xiao Su pondered for a moment and said, "The ice crystal flower is extremely resistant to cold. When you are searching, pay special attention to places with ice cellars." Turin and Huling immediately acknowledged and retreated. Xiao Su turned his head and saw the little fellow standing at the window, looking at the darkening sky without blinking. He got up and walked over, standing beside her. "Will I see snow before the new year?" "Maybe. I had a dream last night. I dreamed that the sky was full of snowflakes. The snow was so high that it reached my knees. However, I was very happy because I saw the ice crystal flower at my feet. The rarer something is, the more precious it is. At that time, the ice crystal flower in front of me was as free as cabbage. I could play with it. What you think about during the day, you dream about it at night. Xiao Su put his hand on her shoulder, but did not say anything. Chapter 411. It will be New Year's Eve in a month. She hoped that by New Year's, she would be able to find those two herbs. She hoped it would come true. But dreams were plentiful, while reality was always thin. In a flash, 3 days had passed. Regarding the ice crystal flower, whether it was Yi Ling Feng or Hua Ling, none of them had found anything. Yi Ling Feng tried to find out the identity of the great master, but because the person was mysterious and the Jiang country's emperor deliberately hid it, no one knew the identity of the great master monk. The imperial palace of the Jiang kingdom was more heavily guarded than before. Everyone kept their mouths shut about the assassination, saying that they were ordered by their superiors not to leak any information. As for the matter of the third princess, there was no clue at all. It was as if he had vanished into thin air in the past 1.5 years, and no one could find any trace of her. Everything seemed to have fallen into an endless cycle. Hua Ling and the others did not say anything, but they were already feeling anxious. They left early and returned late, so busy that their feet did not even touch the ground. Chu Qingyan looked at the big ice cube playing chess with himself without revealing anything. She felt a bit relieved in her heart. The big ice cube's body was not suitable for worrying about these things, and she could not just sit there and wait for death. Chu Qingyan immediately returned to her room and changed her female clothes into men's clothes. She did not think too much and returned to Xiao Su's room. Big ice cube, I'm going out shopping with big sister Dugu. Is there anything you want to buy? I'll bring it back for you. Chu Qingyan leaned against the door frame and poked her head out to ask him. Xiao Su's hand paused as he heard her voice and turned to look at her. She was dressed in a simple young man's outfit, and her hair was tied up high with a blue ribbon. At this moment, because of her movements, her hair was hanging down from her shoulders. Her white and jade-like fingers were dotted with dark red dots, making her look cute and pretty. She was still young, and it was hard to tell if she was a male or female in men's clothing. Walking outside, she could confuse others. The corners of her eyes were smiling, and she looked like a child who was about to go out and ask an elder before leaving. Xiao Su's slightly furrowed brows relaxed the moment he saw her. Go early and come back early. He thought that she would be worried after not hearing any news for a few days, but now that he saw her vitality, he relaxed. All right. Chu Qingyan smiled. When she left in a flash, the smile on her face disappeared. She could be anxious and sad, but she couldn't show it in front of Big Ice. Because emotions were contagious, she didn't want him to be affected by her. As the light footsteps slowly walked away, Xiao Su pinched his brows and threw down the black chess piece in his hand. He stood by the window, his black hair like clouds, his posture straight and stern, his brows slightly furrowed. No one could tell what he was thinking from those eyes that were as deep as the sea. At this time, Chu Qingyan had already walked to the entrance of the mansion. Du Guqing was waiting there impatiently. Why are you dilly-dallying? If you delay any longer, it will be dark soon. Do you understand? Du Guqing hurriedly scolded her, then pulled her hand and quickly walked down the street, while Jean Xian followed closely behind. When they walked to the downtown area, Du Guqing was playing with the things on the stalls and turned to ask her, You suddenly invited me out to play today. Do you have anything you want to buy? The rouge and face powder in the Waterplum Pavilion are not bad. Do you want to take a look? Chu Qingyan heard this and shook her head. I didn't come out to buy anything. That's strange. Don't tell me you came out to enjoy the scenery? Du Guqing put down the things in her hand and walked her. If you want to enjoy the scenery, you shouldn't go to Wanjing Market, but to the West City. There is a plum forest there. You can take this opportunity to enjoy the plum blossoms. No, I also didn't come here to enjoy the scenery. I want to go to a crowded place and listen to the gossip of the people. Chu Qingyan showed 8 standard teeth and gave a flattering smile to the black-faced Du Guqing in front of her. Du Guqing held her forehead. I thought you came out to play. I didn't know you had this idea. Forget it. I'll be a good person to the end and help the Buddha to the west. Come with me. I know there's a gathering place for gossip here, but Chu Qingyan was happy to see her agree. But made her tremble. But what? Du Guqing revealed a sly smile. Your little heart must be able to take it. Chu Qingyan shrugged, showing that she was not stressed at all. Before going to the gathering place for gossip, Du Guqing took Chu Qingyan to a ready-made clothing store, changed into men's clothes, and then set off. Sister Dugu, I found that you look pretty good in men's clothes. Chu Qingyan looked at the person in front of her. A green jade pendant was tied around her waist, and her hair was tied up with a white jade hairpin. Her skin was fair and clean, and there was a hint of vermilion on her lips. She was different from her usual bright and beautiful appearance, and more charming. Du Guqing turned slightly when she heard this, and the sapphire blue corset skirt she was wearing drew a beautiful arc at her feet. She raised her index finger and tapped her chin, smiling contentedly. Actually, I look quite similar to my younger brother when I wear men's clothes. Little Qingyan, do you know that I have a twin brother? He's quite good-looking. I'll introduce you to him if there's chance. Chu Qingyan did not expect that she had a twin brother, and could not help but nod. Okay, but who would have thought that by the time they met, they would already be strangers? It's getting late. Let's set off. Du Guqing pulled her towards the crowd. Later, don't call me sister, call me brother. As for you, you're my younger brother, so you'll be called Du Guqing. I'll lend you his name for the time being. Speaking of him, I kind of miss him. I don't know where that brat went. Du Guqing nagged along the way. Du Guqing? Did the combination of the siblings' names mean Qing Tian? Chu Qingyan's lips curved. They must be a pair of siblings who had a good relationship. When Du Guqing brought Chu Qingyan to stand in front of a building, Chu Qingyan looked at the words on the signboard and resisted the urge to twitch her eyes. This is? She pointed at the building, somewhat in disbelief. Du Guqing smiled and said in a normal manner, a gathering place for gossip. The moment she finished speaking, the women who heard the commotion stood on the second floor, waving their handkerchiefs at them. 2 young masters, come and have a drink. We have the best wine here. Do you want to listen to a little song? I guarantee that you'll come with worries and leave with no worries. Chu Qingyan put down her hand, and her eyes swept over the male guests coming in and out. The astonishment on her face was immediately replaced by a smile, and she did not show the slightest bit of stage fright. It had to be said that this was indeed a gathering place for gossip. Du Guqing originally thought that she would back out, but she did not expect her to adapt so well. She could not help but shrug. Then let's go in. Chu Qingyan nodded, and before she took a step, she suddenly said to the person beside her, I realize that you and Yi Lingfeng actually have some similarities such as this. Her voice trailed off with a hint of smile. Du Guqing's face darkened. She was actually teased by this 10-year-old child. This person was really the same as Xiao Su, haggling over the smallest details. Chapter 412. Heavenly Fragrance Brothel. It was a place of debauchery at night and elegance during the day. It was not an ordinary brothel, because the brothel did not accept guests during the day and was exceptionally lively at night. During the day, it was still extraordinarily lively. Because the owner of Heavenly Fragrant Brothel was very good at doing business, the guests at night were all beauties, while the guests during the day were mostly artists who knew how to play the zither, go, poetry, and painting. If you thought that the people who came here during the day were all young talents, then you were wrong. Some rich people or peddlers also liked to experience this kind of cultured life. Scholars, merchants, commoners, officials, there were only people that you could not imagine. There was no one that you could not see. When Chu Qingyan and Du Guqing stepped into Heavenly Fragrance Brothel, a nanny who was in charge came up. She first bowed to them, then smiled and said, Do the 2 of you want to listen to the zither, watch the dance, or play chess? Guests, please feel free to tell us. We guarantee that you will be satisfied here. Chu Qingyan glanced at the hall downstairs. It was a red building, and the walls were hung with either ink paintings or zither and flute. Between the first floor and the second floor, there was a sky building, and the rooms were separated. There were tables and chairs, but no doors. If one wanted to avoid suspicion, they could roll up the curtains and close them. It was just past noon, and there were already many people sitting downstairs and in the Sky Building. Some were dressed in luxurious clothes, and some were dressed in official robes. Although they were of different statuses, there was a graceful woman by their side. These women did not have the aura of a prostitute, but rather looked very much like a young lady from a wealthy family. They were full of jade and delicate makeup. Some were grinding ink, some were playing chess, some were playing the zither, and some were dancing. At first glance, it really looked like a place filled with the fragrance of books. We will just sit on the first floor. I want two ladies who are good at grinding ink, not too quiet. It will be better if they can accompany us brothers to talk and relieve our boredom. Duguqing was like a regular customer and did not choose from the nanny, but directly ordered. Just as Chu Qingyan was sizing up the heavenly fragrance restaurant, the granny was also sizing up the two of them without revealing anything. The people who worked in this kind of place all had a pair of discerning eyes. They didn't care if the person was male or female, old or young. As long as they could afford it, they would accept it. The two of them were dressed in extraordinary clothes, and their every movement carried the demeanor of an aristocratic family. Even the guards behind them, although young, had an aura that couldn't be ignored. The mama had a plan in mind and agreed to Duguqing's request with a smile. Good, good, good. Two young masters, this way, please. Our young lady will be here soon. As she spoke, she signaled with her eyes for a servant girl to lead the two to their seats. Chu Qingyan stopped looking around and followed behind Duguqing. Since she was familiar with this place, she just had to follow her closely. Not long after he sat down, two delicate and pretty ladies walked over. One of them was holding a piece of paper, while the other was holding a brush and an inkstone. If it was any other place, one would really think that they were the maids of a prestigious family. Mo greets the two young masters. The lady dressed in light green bowed with a faint smile. Yin greets the two young masters. The lady dressed in light yellow bowed with a faint smile. Chu Qingyan looked at the two of them without saying anything. From their voices, she could tell that they were lively women. They weren't bashful or delicate. You don't have to be so formal. Grind the ink. Duguqing didn't stand on ceremony and directly ordered. After that, she whispered to Chu Qingyan, in this kind of place, the more polite you are to them, the more it means that you are a newcomer and don't know the rules. Later, they will trick you. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes, indicating that she understood. Although she didn't know what kind of trick she would be tricked in this place, since Duguqing said so, she would do as she was told. How should I address the two young masters? Mo put the plate on the table and took out an inkstone while asking. I'm Duguqing. This is my brother, Duguqing. Chu Qingyan said naturally and generously. Duguqing nodded secretly. Good. Yin spread the rice paper and then turned to ask, are the two young masters here to read poems and write couplets? Yes. Chu Qingyan's eyes began to pay attention to the people around and said perfunctorily. Duguqing knew what she was thinking. When she picked up the brush, she said to Yin and Mo, my brother just finished the private school. I guess he doesn't want to write now. When you can talk with him. Yin and Mo nodded with a smile. Chu Qingyan held her chin with one hand and watched Duguqing write. She asked casually, did anything interesting happen in the street recently? Tell me about it. After listening to the teachers nagging for a day, my ears are going to grow calluses. Yin was standing by the side. When he heard Chu Qingyan's words, he thought for a moment and said, it's very quiet outside, and it seems like nothing big has happened. However, we heard quite a few interesting things in the Heaven Fragrance Inn. Oh, Chu Qingyan pretended to be surprised. She took out a silver ingot from her pocket and put it on the table. She looked like a young master who didn't know much about the world. She said with a smile, if you can tell me something that makes me feel comfortable, I'll give you a lot of silver. Just now, the mama told them that these two young masters were rich and noble. She asked them to treat them well. They didn't expect them to be so generous. Yin and Mo immediately responded with an alas. Yin picked out a rumor from these days and said, young Master Tian, Do you know that official Yang divorced his wife a few days ago? Official Yang? Chu Qingyan was puzzled. Why did he suddenly divorce his wife? Looking at her, she knew that she had never heard of it. Ing Yin said, Official Yang is the Minister of War of our Jiang Kingdom. I heard that a few days ago, he took his family to the Buddhist temple to participate in the sacrifice. Mrs. Yang said to her daughter that a girl should know her place and not be willful like other princesses. She lost her marriage and her face, so she didn't dare to come out for a long time. I don't know how this matter got out. Official Yang was fined half a year's salary and demoted by 1 rank. Then, Official Yang went home and wrote a letter to divorce Mrs. Yang. Chu Qingyan sighed inwardly. This Jiang Kingdom's emperor really doted on this third princess. He didn't even allow others to gossip about her, but it was difficult to stop everyone from talking. She could only say that this was the pitiful love of a parent. However, Ing Yin brought out the information she wanted to inquire about. Of all the things Mistress Yang could have said, she just had to talk about the third princess. She really reaped what she sowed. Chu Qingyan sighed and went straight to the point. Then have you heard why the third princess broke off the engagement? I've always heard rumors, but I don't know what happened. Do you know the inside story? Ing Yin thought for a while. I heard about it last year, but I don't know whether it's true or not. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but say, Miss Ing Yin, please tell me. Chapter 413. Ing Yin thought that this matter had been discussed thousands of times, so she did not avoid it. She said calmly, the third princess broke off the engagement in the early summer of last year. At that time, the third princess's wedding sedan had already arrived at the Tang mansion. They were about to perform the wedding ceremony, but the third princess was thinking about something at that time. No matter how the matron of honor indicated, she did not bow to heaven and earth. Just when everyone was wondering, the third princess suddenly opened her mouth and seemed to ask if second young Master Tang really wanted to marry her. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan could not help but be puzzled. Wasn't it too strange to ask the groom at such a crucial time? Did something happen before the wedding ceremony? It had to be said that Chu Qingyan was sensitive. She did receive a message before Jiang Yunyao performed the wedding ceremony, and this message led to her sudden decision. Then what happened? Du Qing, who was writing, immediately asked. Chu Qingyan felt that people were always gossipy when it came to such matters between men and women. For example, Du Qing, who was in front of her, pricked up her ears while writing, but she was also curious. Later, I don't know what second young Master Tang said, but the third princess lifted the veil and ordered people to stop the marriage on the spot. Then she said to second young Master Tang that the 9-day sweet dew was my gift for breaking off the engagement. Finally, she apologized to the 2 elders of the Tang family and returned to the imperial palace with the palace maids and bodyguards. What a straightforward woman. As a woman, Du Qing could not help but praise. 9-day sweet dew. Chu Qingyan, who had been listening carefully, caught the words. She felt that the third princess suddenly mentioned this thing at that time, so it must be very important. Otherwise, she could have said gold, silver, jewelry, or silk. Why did she only mention this thing? It sounded like the name of a medicine. Seeing Chu Qingyan repeat these words, Mo, who was grinding the ink, explained, this 9-day sweet dew is a very precious pill. I heard that third young Miss Tang has a very serious illness, and the doctor once said that this illness cannot be cured without the 9-day sweet dew. Presumably, the third princess felt guilty for breaking off the engagement, so she used the 9-day sweet dew as an apology gift. A marriage in exchange for a life. It sounds quite worth it. Du Qing stopped writing and nodded. The third princess is a kind person, and the people of the Jiang Kingdom have received many favors from her. Although the third princess broke off the engagement, in our hearts, she is still a good princess who loves her people as her children. Mo. However, Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart. This matter was not that simple. How could a princess who had broken off her engagement say such things so rationally? She must have made the decision after hearing second young Master Tang's words. Chu Qingyan really wanted to know what second young Master Tang had said at that time. Moreover, The 9 days due was the key to breaking off the engagement. Otherwise, she would not have coincidentally delivered it to third young Mistress Tang when she was lacking it. If Jiang Yinyao knew what Chu Qingyan was thinking, she would probably give her a thumbs up. However, many people speculate that it was second young Master Tang who let third princess down. Mo placed the paper that Du Guqing had written on the table and replaced it with new paper before continuing. What? Chu Qingyan's hand that was holding the teacup paused, and she looked at her with wide eyes. Seeing that she was fascinated, Mo said, because after this matter, second young Master Tang locked himself in his room for 3 days and 3 nights. When he came out, he was very haggard. When his friends mentioned this matter, he said that it had nothing to do with the third princess and that it was not her fault. Later, he also forbade others to talk about this matter. So many people said that second young Master Tang was arrogant. If second young Master Tang did not have a guilty conscience, why would he do this? Hearing Mo's explanation, Chu Qingyan was even more certain that there was something fishy about this matter. But as time passed, it was useless for her to investigate further. However, she admired such a straightforward woman. If there was a chance, she would like to meet this third princess. The name of this 9 days sounds very interesting. Today, I also saw a few unique names of medicine in a book. Let me test you. Do you know what they are? Chu Qingyan did not waste her breath on this matter of breaking off the engagement. Instead, she took the opportunity to draw out Duan Qing's purpose. Du Guqing glanced at Chu Qingyan. This little Qingyan was quite smart. She knew how to throw a brick to attract jade. This little girl does not know many names of medicine, but there is no harm in asking young Master Tian. Perhaps you will hit the jackpot. Yan's words were pleasing. Coupled with the mischievous smile on his face, it made people feel comfortable getting along with him. Chu Qingyan secretly nodded. The girls cultivated by this heavenly fragrance brothel were really different from the girls of other brothels. Good. If you know, this young master will reward you handsomely. Chu Qingyan did not mind playing the role of a rich second generation. She had not experienced it before, but now she was satisfied. Yan and Mo nodded even more seriously. It was rare to meet a young master who squandered money like dirt. Have you heard of mugwort leaves? Chu Qingyan started from the simplest and progressed step by step. Only then would it not be too abrupt. Mo knows mugwort leaves. In summer, when the flowers have not yet bloomed, the leaves are plucked and dried. It can stop bleeding and treat typhoid. Mo spoke clearly and logically. Chu Qingyan nodded in appreciation. These girls had indeed been trained. They were involved in many aspects. What about planting grass? Chu Qingyan continued to ask. A few days ago, this little girl saw big sister Yin taking planting grass. She said that this herb has the effect of dispelling phlegm and suppressing coughs. Is Yin right? Yin was not to be outdone. You're all right. These are your rewards. Chu Qingyan took out 2 ingots of silver from her sleeve and placed them in their hands. Yin and Mo had never seen so much silver. They immediately bowed and thanked her. This little brother of mine has a strange hobby. If someone makes him happy, he likes to reward them. Du Guqing shook her head helplessly. When the two heard Chu Qingyan's words, they were very excited. They hoped that Chu Qingyan would ask a few more questions. This was more than what they could get by serving people for half a year. The thoughts on their faces were exactly what Chu Qingyan wanted. You are too smart. Let me think of a difficult one. She pretended to ponder for a moment and then said, That's right. In this world, there's a kind of herb called ice crystal flower. Have you heard of it? Ice crystal flower? Yin and Mo looked at each other. They were a little confused. Chu Qingyan did not plan to get any information from them immediately. Since this was a place where all sorts of people would gather, she might as well bribe them with money. They would definitely think of ways to find out more information about the ice crystal flower. The ladies of the wind, flower, snow, and moon pavilion naturally had their own methods and information network. They might even be able to get the information faster than Huoling and the others. When Chu Qingyan was about to open her mouth, there was a sudden commotion from aside. She subconsciously turned her head and unexpectedly met a pair of charming phoenix eyes. Chapter 414. Where did such a handsome Gongzi come from? If I can get his attention, I can die without regrets. He looked at me, I fainted. Chu Qingyan listened to those chattering voices and felt helpless. Why did this person always appear with the special effect of, I'm a disaster because of my good looks? He's coming towards us. Mo whispered excitedly. Chu Qingyan looked helplessly at the person strolling over. She really didn't want to say the same thing to those people who pretended to meet Yi Lingfeng. Unfortunately, he was already here. She couldn't just turn a blind eye to him, right? What a coincidence, Dongting. She sighed inwardly, then lazily raised her smile. It seems like you don't welcome this Gongzi very much. The person who came was Higashio Motetsu, dressed in a flirtatious purple robe. The collar of his brocade robe had a circle of high-quality fox fur, which made his lips red and teeth white. He was tall and slender. He slightly bent over, approaching her with a smile that was somewhat unsightly. Chu Qingyan inconspicuously leaned back, increasing the distance between the two of them. She said innocently, "Welcome, but I didn't expect you to appear here." Higashio Motetsu didn't mind. He pulled a chair and sat down, looking at her with a lazy and unrestrained expression. The world is vast. I didn't expect to meet an old acquaintance just by walking around. It's fate. He deliberately emphasized the word fate, his smile somewhat unclear. Chu Qingyan glanced at him, muttering inwardly, "Don't think I don't know you. You obviously knew that we were coming to Jiang country, so you deliberately followed us." But after shouting this in her heart, Chu Qingyan was somewhat puzzled. What was this person's purpose for following them? If he had a purpose, he was well behaved. If he didn't have a purpose, he could see her everywhere. She didn't believe that there were so many coincidences in the world. There were only man-made encounters, and there weren't repeated coincidences. This is Duguqing, who had been ignored by the two, put down the pen in her hand and looked suspiciously at the handsome man who had suddenly appeared. This was the first time she had seen a man who was able to combine gorgeous and handsome without any sense of dissonance. The man looked like a woman, escaping without a trace, shining brilliantly. Even though she had seen so many handsome men before, she couldn't help but stare blankly. Fortunately, she already had someone in her heart. Otherwise, she might have really been bewitched. Let me introduce you. This is Duguqing, and this is Higashio Motetsu, my good friend. Chu Qingyan introduced the two. Higashio Motetsu looked at Duguqing and raised his hand. "Nice to meet you." Duguqing also replied. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two was a little strange, Duguqing thought for a moment and set up another table to give the two some space. Higashio Motetsu nodded in satisfaction at Duguqing's tactfulness. Yin and Mo were also taken away by Duguqing. The distance between each table was not close. If the two spoke in a low voice, no one would hear. "Little girl, do you owe me a favor?" Higashio Motetsu poured himself a cup of tea, as if the words came out of his mouth. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. These words surprised her. She didn't remember owing him any favor. Higashio Motetsu saw her reaction and pretended to hold his heart. "Little girl, you have deeply hurt me. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have saved you." Looking at his posture, Chu Qingyan had the urge to facepalm. A perfectly good man actually acted like a little girl. What kind of appearance was that? But she had to admit that even if he held his heart, it didn't make people feel disgusted. Instead, it had a different kind of feeling. Sure enough, this was a world that looked at faces. "Are you talking about that time when I fainted from a fever in the forest?" Chu Qingyan remembered the last time they met. When she woke up, she was in the medical center. "That's right. You're not too heartless. You can still be saved." In the blink of an eye, he put away the heart-holding posture. He still had the soul-stirring and enchanting appearance. Just now, his expression was like a flash in the pan. She had already experienced this person's ability to change his expression, so she wasn't surprised. But she also had a debt to settle with him. "I didn't expect you to take the initiative to mention it. I forgot about it, Chu Qingyin snorted. The people in medical center said that when they opened the door, they saw me lying on the ground. Didn't you know that I was having a high fever at that time? It was freezing cold, but you just casually threw me aside. Weren't you worried that I would get sick? Higashio Motetsu glanced at her. Aren't you still fine now? Besides, if I hadn't been so kind, you would probably have reported to the king of hell by now. Chu Qingyin continued to snort. Anyway, we're even. I don't owe you a favor, and you don't owe me anything. Higashio Motetsu was amused by her. His voice was so moving that it was like a spring breeze brushing past his delicate and flawless cheeks. His silky black hair draped over his shoulders. As his shoulders shook, it drew a beautiful arc around his waist. Little girl, are you afraid that I will use this opportunity to blackmail you into doing something? After he laughed, his phoenix eyes were still a little dizzy, but his words hit the nail on the head. Chu Qingyin was taken aback. She did not expect him to be so straightforward. She tapped her finger on the teacup and twirled it around on the table. A faint smile appeared on her exquisite face as she said, "There are some things that you should know in your heart. Why should you say it out loud?" He originally wanted to see the little girl's expression change, but he didn't expect her to admit it directly. Higashio Motetsu picked up the teacup to hide the surprise on his face. After clearing his throat, he said, "It's true that heroes come from generation to generation. I can't win against you." As soon as he finished speaking, he changed the topic. "According to the schedule, you arrived at the capital of Jiang Kingdom nearly half a month later. It's obvious that you encountered some trouble. The topic just now stopped, and they didn't mention it again. Both of them had a tacit understanding. We did encounter some trouble, but it's all in the past." Chu Qingyin continued circling the table, thinking about how to make Ing Yin and Ing Emo not suspect her, and willingly help her inquire about the news. "Have you found those two things?" Higashio Motetsu saw that she didn't seem to want to talk about what happened on the way, so he didn't force her. Anyway, he had already guessed most of it. She had mentioned the ice crystal flower and the love grass to him before. She wasn't surprised that he asked about it now. "Is there any more?" "There's no news at all." Chu Qingyin shook her head, looking a little helpless. "Those two things are rare in the world. If you want to know their whereabouts, I'm afraid you have to take some unusual paths to find some clues." Higashio Motetsu said slowly. The fingers circling the table paused. Chu Qingyin immediately raised her head and looked at him intently. "You have a way?" Higashio Motetsu tapped the table with his fingers. Seeing her looking at him nervously, he suddenly smiled and leaned closer to her. "Little girl, beg me." Chapter 415. Little girl, beg me. When Chu Qingyin heard this, she had the urge to smash his head open with a hammer. That was enough. Chu Qingyin turned her head away and missed his breath. "Dong Ting, stop fooling around." Stop fooling around? Was she treating him like a child? Higashio Motetsu's eyes twitched, but his tone was good as he said, "If you beg me, maybe I'll tell you when I'm happy." Chu Qingyin's lips curved into a creepy smile. "You wish." Higashio Motetsu saw her reaction and narrowed his eyes. He leaned back against the chair and said with a smile, "Little girl, don't you want to know the fastest way? Whether you say it or not, the initiative is in your hands. You want me to beg you? Then forget it." Chu Qingyin shrugged indifferently. Higashio Motetsu did not force her and said casually, "In another 30 days, the poison will take effect. It's a pity that the king of this region died at such a young age. But this also makes those who are eyeing him covetously and want to get rid of this thorn in their side happy." When he said this, he gave a low chuckle. This young master has seen a lot of this kind of situation where the people close to him are sad and the enemy's happy. "Little girl, you're really ruthless." Seeing that Chu Qingyin was unmoved, Higashio Motetsu took a sip of tea and then unexpectedly stood up. He shook his sleeves and looked like he was about to leave. "Little girl, this tea is not bad. Consider it as repayment for saving my life. It's getting late. This young master should go back. I hope that we will have a chance to meet again in the future." She knew that he was certain that she would not let him go, but she did not know what his motive was. She was afraid that if she blindly agreed to him, it would cause harm to herself or the big ice cube. Chu Qingyin tightened her grip on the teacup, and it fell onto the table with a thud. She looked up at him from the corner of her eyes. The struggle in her eyes was obvious, but quickly settled down. Her voice was as calm as before. "What conditions do you have?" Higashio Motetsu wasn't surprised when he saw her relaxed expression. He knew that she was willing to do anything for Xiao Su. On that rainy night, he had already seen how fearless she was. It was hard for him to imagine that a little girl could have so much courage when she exploded. As a result, his heart was somewhat unconvinced. Why would such a cold person like Xiao Su have such a woman to sacrifice for him? Suddenly, he felt somewhat indignant. However, this was just an occasional emotion, and he didn't pay much attention to it. Especially when he found out that she had appeared at Heavenly Fragrance House. A touch of joy surfaced in his heart. He couldn't wait to see her. He liked to see her being bullied by him until she was deflated, but she didn't dare to speak up. Higashio Motetsu moved and sat down again. He poured himself a cup of tea, but he wasn't in a hurry to drink it. Instead, he looked up and looked at her magnanimously. "Little girl, don't think of this young master so badly. I was just teasing you earlier." Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes at him. "You're so playful." He raised his eyebrows and smiled. "If I really asked you to exchange conditions with this young master, would you agree?" Knowing that he was really joking earlier, Chu Qingyin's heart heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that he was teasing her, she didn't take it to heart. "That depends on what conditions. Cheating, swindling, stealing, killing, arson, robbing, violating filial piety and etiquette, don't even think about it." She really was a little girl with strong principles. She killed all the unstable elements in one fell swoop. Higashio Motetsu didn't say much either. He raised his hand and tapped the tea in the cup, then wrote on the table. Chu Qingyin leaned over and saw the words that appeared on the table. She softly read, "Underground Blue Manor." She looked at the person beside her in confusion. "What is this place?" Higashio Motetsu smiled. His index finger and thumb rested on his cheek as he slowly said, "Underground Blue Manor. This is the underground city of Jiang Country's trade. It's not bound by any imperial authority, and there's no distinction between good and evil. It's a mysterious organization hidden among the common people." "Similar to a black market trade?" Chu Qingyin asked thoughtfully. "That's about the same thing. Every country has a trade city like this. They hide underground, and every operation is very secretive. No one knows where they are located or who the participants are. Those who can receive an invitation are not all rich and noble people. They don't limit their status. As long as you have rare treasures or unique skills that others don't have, you have a chance to ask for an invitation. Every time, the participants will know the approximate location of the event within an hour before the event begins." Higashio Motetsu patiently explained. "So mysterious?" Chu Qingyin frowned. Higashio Motetsu glanced at her. "An organization that can wander around the imperial authority and exist for a long time must have its uniqueness. Many emperors want to get rid of it, but sometimes even the imperial family can't handle it. They have to rely on such a trade city. Those who participate in the trade, some are seriously ill, some have peerless medical skills, some have deep hatred, some are famous killers, some are thirsty for talent, and some are full of wisdom. But they all take what they need." She suddenly understood and looked at Higashio Motetsu. "So what you're trying to say is that I might be able to get some information in this trade city?" Higashio Motetsu nodded. "The things that can be taken out in the trade city are not ordinary. Rare gems, herbs, unique skills, weapons. You can basically see them all inside, but what?" Chu Qingyin's scalp tightened. What she hated the most were unexpected twists and turns, which made people whet their appetites. If you want to get something you like, you must also have something that you can take out. If you have something and the other party doesn't want to exchange it, you'll be happy for nothing. Higashio Motetsu tapped the table with one hand and said to her from the side. He had said all the ugly words in advance and asked her to consider it carefully. "I understand this rule." Chu Qingyin nodded and then asked, "Then when will the trade in this underground Blue Manor start?" This little girl was quite impatient. You're considered lucky. 3 months ago, the underground Blue Manor held a trade in Junlan. I heard that it will be held again in 2 days in the Jiang Kingdom. Higashio Motetsu said leisurely. His expression was languid as he leaned on the table. He didn't sit properly, but it didn't make people dislike him. Instead, they felt that such an outstanding person, no matter what he did, would be glorious and dazzling. That's great. It's better to come at the right time than to come early. Then can you take me there? Chu Qingyan immediately smiled and asked. Higashio Motetsu glanced at her and shook his head with a low laugh. Little girl, do you think that you can casually enter this kind of place? Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes and was a little annoyed. If I can't enter, then why are you still talking so much nonsense with me? Higashio Motetsu saw that she was about to explode again and couldn't help but laugh. I said that you can't casually enter, but I didn't say that this young master can't enter. Chapter 416. He's keeping me in suspense again. He's really making me anxious to death. Chu Qingyan despised him in her heart, then said to him in a flattering tone, Then may I ask, young master, what method do you have to enter? Knowing that she didn't mean what she said, Higashio Motetsu didn't bicker with her because he had his own plans. Unfortunately, I know how to get an invitation, he said calmly. Then may I ask you to bring me along? Chu Qingyan helped him change his teacup and personally poured him a cup of tea as she asked politely. The little ass was so submissive. Other than when he kidnapped her, he rarely saw her this obedient. Higashio Motetsu took the tea she offered and said leisurely, It's not impossible to bring you along. In the instant that the other party's eyes lit up, he continued, It's just that this young master has never done a losing transaction, so you have to show your sincerity. Didn't you say that we're friends? Is there a need to bicker over this kind of thing? Chu Qingyan smiled embarrassedly. Haven't you heard that even blood-related brothers have to settle accounts clearly? Higashio Motetsu deliberately saw her helpless expression and calmly retorted. Chu Qingyan's face darkened. He had said so much, but didn't he still come back to the original point? She even thought that he was a righteous person, but she really couldn't judge a book by its cover. She was annoyed and snatched the teacup that Higashio Motetsu had delivered to her mouth. She drank it in one gulp, wiped the corner of her mouth, and went straight to the point. Tell me the truth, what do you want? As long as I can give it to you. Seeing her gulp it down, Higashio Motetsu felt that it was a pity for the tea to disappear just like that. However, he didn't care. Hearing her ask so directly, he didn't beat around the bush. Sometimes there was a limit to teasing people. For the sake of the long term, he should stop. Otherwise, if the little lass got angry and bit him, wouldn't he lose this kind of benefit in the future? This young master helped you once, so you owe me a favor, Higashio Motetsu said unhurriedly. Sure enough, he had revealed his fox tail. Chu Qingyan nodded without hesitation. Tell me, what do you want me to do? No. Higashio Motetsu stretched out a finger and waved it in front of her eyes. This young master hasn't thought about it yet. I'll tell you when I think about it. What a thief! Chu Qingyan cursed in her heart. Are you secretly scolding this young master? Higashio Motetsu saw her furrowed brows and gritted teeth and quickly deduced her mental activity. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at him. You're thinking too much. Am I the kind of person who would secretly curse people? If I want to curse people, I will do it openly. Little girl, you have to know that there is no free lunch in this world. If a pie falls from the sky, then you have to guard against it. Do you understand? Higashio Motetsu pointed out to her. His expression was no longer as casual as before and had a trace of seriousness. You make it sound like you're so open and above board, but aren't you just adding insult to injury and taking advantage of the situation? Chu Qingyan muttered in dissatisfaction. Higashio Motetsu slightly raised his phoenix eyes, and his voice was filled with resentment. Little girl, I'm helping you. How can you repay kindness with enmity? Chu Qingyan said disapprovingly. If you don't ask for compensation, I will be even more grateful to you. All right, don't be angry. This is the rule of the pugilistic world. You should get used to it soon. Higashio Motetsu acted like he was coaxing a child as he reached out to pat her head. Chu Qingyin leaned to the side and avoided his outstretched hand. She said with a serious expression, "Men and women should not touch each other. Don't get touchy." Higashio Motetsu's eyes narrowed. This little fellow really knew how to treat people differently. She did not treat Xiao Su as an outsider. He knew that she was on guard against him, and he did have his own plans. However, he was only interested in this little girl for a while. When he was tired of her, he would not have such thoughts. Chu Qingyan raised her head and saw him leaning against the back of the chair with a faint smile. His eyes were faint and distant. She thought that he was thinking about something again and did not think too much about it. And she told Yanning Ma what she wanted them to do, and then took Duguqing back. "So fast? Don't you have something to do?" Because Higashio Motetsu was present, Duguqing asked vaguely. "No need. Let's go back." Although she did not find out anything, she still gained something from this trip. At this time, she did not have any intention to stay. Duguqing did not ask anything else. She nodded to Higashio Motetsu and followed Chu Qingyin to leave. Watching Chu Qingyin's figure disappear at the door, Higashio Motetsu picked up his cup and slowly drank. The granny who had served Chu Qingyin and Duguqing earlier walked over. Her expression was no longer as eager and fawning as before. Instead, it was filled with respect. "Young palace master, since you're going to the Blue Manor to help that person search for something, why don't you let Yanning Ma tell her where it is?" The mama asked in confusion. "I was going to make a trip to the Blue Manor. It's a little boring to be alone, so I brought her along to relieve my boredom. Besides, do I look like a kind person?" Higashio Motetsu smiled mysteriously. He was afraid that Chu Qingyin, who had walked out, did not know that this heavenly fragrance house was his property. However, he liked the feeling of having everything under control. At this time, Chu Qingyin and Duguqing were on their way back. "Why did you leave before we found out the whereabouts of the ice crystal flower?" After leaving the heavenly fragrance house, Duguqing did not have any scruples and asked the question in her heart. Chu Qingyin was still thinking about what happened just now. When she heard her question, she replied, "It seems that we can't find out its whereabouts at the moment." She paused and suddenly said, "Sister Dugu, do you know about the existence of the underground Blue Manor?" Duguqing was a little surprised to hear these words. "Why are you suddenly asking this? Was it that Higashio Motetsu who told you just now?" Chu Qingyin did not hide anything from her and told her what Higashio Motetsu had told her. Duguqing nodded her head in understanding. "He's right. This Blue Manor is very mysterious. If you want to find out more information, that place is indeed a good place. However, I've heard quite a lot of rumors about it. It has many rules, and if you accidentally violate them, your end will be very miserable." Duguqing's words were similar to what Higashio Motetsu had said, so Chu Qingyin was relieved. It wasn't that she had a problem with Higashio Motetsu, but when she went out, she had to be careful. "Since he has a way to get an invitation, then bring me along with you. I've long wanted to see this mysterious organization that walks between the imperial power and the common people." Duguqing grabbed her hand and pleaded. Chu Qingyin looked at her excited eyes, and her scalp went numb. Dong Ting said that he can only bring one person, so I'm sorry, Sister Dugu. "So petty." Duguqing pursed her lips. Then she leaned forward and said maliciously, "Little Qingyin, you want to go alone? Don't forget that you still have Big Ice Cube at home. Would he bear to let you take the risk?" Chu Qingyin heard this and felt a headache coming on. Chapter 417. Chu Qingyin scratched her head. "Big Sister Dugu, can you cover for me? Depends on your performance." Duguqing smiled slyly. Chu Qingyin felt that it was really unfortunate to have bad friends like them who liked to take advantage of a burning house. Returning to the E estate, she happened to bump into Lingfeng, who was preparing to go out. Duguqing was still holding a grudge against him for what happened 2 days ago, so she deliberately snorted coldly in front of him and left with a flick of her sleeves. Lingfeng watched her leave, the folding fan in his hand fanning himself unnaturally. His young master Preparing to go out? Chu Qingyan was afraid that he would feel awkward, so she took the initiative to ask. I have an appointment with a friend. I'm going to attend the banquet. Feng quickly regained his elegant demeanor, without the slightest bit of uneasiness from before. Chu Qingyan nodded. Then young master, please go ahead. I won't disturb you any further. She was about to leave when Feng called out to her. Is there anything else, young master, Chu Qingyan was puzzled. You in a heavenly fragrance house today? Feng hesitated for a moment before speaking. Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes. You sent someone to follow us? Seeing Chu Qingyan's vigilant expression, Feng hurriedly explained. Miss Chu, please don't misunderstand. I didn't send anyone to follow you, but I saw that both of you were dressed in men's clothing, so I guessed. Chu Qingyan immediately relaxed. She was worried that her conversation with Higashio Motetsu would be leaked, but she was still puzzled. How did you know? It was difficult to convince people with just men's clothing. She rarely wears men's clothes. Once she does, she will go to those places. She is not someone who does not know her limits. Since she dares to bring you out, she will naturally go to the Heaven Fragrant Inn, Feng said with a smile. He did not see the ambiguous smile on Chu Qingyan's face because of his words. I see. I didn't expect young master to know big sister Dugu so well. Chu Qingyan looked at him meaningfully. Ahem. Feng covered his mouth with his fan and coughed lightly, avoiding Chu Qingyan's words. Then he said, in the future, you should not go to that kind of place. It is not good for your girl's reputation. Chu Qingyan had already planned to leave, but since Tianyin had brought up the topic, she did not want to let it go. We are going there for business, but since young master is so kind, why don't you tell Sister Dugu about it yourself? I think she will be very happy. I'm afraid she'll say that I only allow the state officials to set fires, but not the common people. Feng imagined her reaction and felt helpless. Looking at Feng's expression, he didn't seem to be uninterested in Duguqing. Chu Qingyan took the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. You can even guess what kind of reaction she will have. You really have a tacit understanding. That's all I have to say. Be careful in the future. Hearing Chu Qingyan's words, Feng's expression changed slightly, and he immediately took his leave. Chu Qingyan looked at his back as he left. She seemed to see a guilty conscience. It seemed that Duguqing's pursuit of her husband was not in vain. It was just that the revolution had not succeeded yet. She still needed to work hard. She was looking forward to this couple. She had even thought of a couple name for them. It would be called Unique or Intentional Couple. Thinking about it, it really sounded wonderful. Chu Qingyan happily walked towards her courtyard. Because she was so relaxed, she did not see the big Buddha standing at the door. You're back. A cold voice sounded from his side. Chu Qingyan subconsciously stopped in her tracks. The big ice cube's tone was not right. She had a bad feeling. Her neck stiffened, and she turned to look at the source of the voice. A smile instantly appeared on her face. I'm back. Under the plum tree, a slender figure stood upright like a pine tree. Above his head were brilliant plum blossoms. They were pink and white, little by little. She could not see the shape of the flowers. She could only feel the faint colors, as if creating a beautiful dream. Unfortunately, when she saw the unsmiling face under the tree, her dream was shattered. Where did you go to play? That strict person was like an elder who had caught a disobedient child and was forcing her to confess. I went to the tea house. She touched the back of her head and smiled guiltily. Xiao Su glanced at her hands. Didn't you say you were going to buy something? What did you buy? The big ice cubes? Eyes were really sharp. Chu Qingyan took a deep breath in her heart. Just as she was thinking of how to smooth things over, she heard him say coldly, Qingyan, come here. She instantly looked up and saw the expressionless person under the plum tree. Her heart was a little uneasy, but her body reacted faster than her mind. When she stood in front of him, she realized that her height had already reached his chest. In a few years, would she be able to reach his shoulders? Xiao Su lowered his head. Feeling her wandering gaze, his eyes turned cold. Show me the swordsmanship once, he suddenly ordered. Ah. Chu Qingyan was shocked back to her senses. Now, what she received in response was a long sword. Chu Qingyan reached out to catch the long sword he threw at her. She did not dare look at him as she immediately brought the sword to the center of the yard. Unsheathing the sword, she began to practice without any hesitation. She did not know why the big ice cube suddenly wanted to see her practice, but she did not dare disobey him. She had a feeling that the big ice cube was angry. But why was he angry? She could not understand it at all. She could only follow his wishes and secretly ask Hu Ling and the others what had happened in the afternoon when she wasn't here. The second move, the fifth move, and the eighth move, your posture is wrong and you don't have enough strength. As punishment, you will practice this set of swordsmanship 3 times. From now on, you're not allowed to be lazy. When she was about to put away her sword after practicing once, she was panting, but she heard this thunder from the clear sky. She wanted to go forward and ask for an explanation in disbelief, but seeing his calm expression, she swallowed her questions. Actually, she knew that there was a problem with her swordsmanship, and she wanted to improve it over the past few days. If the big ice cube had gently pointed it out to her, she would have been very happy. But punishing her like this today made her feel a bit resentful. But after he finished speaking, he had already turned around, leaving her alone in the yard. Although her heart was uncomfortable, she still picked up the sword and began practicing. After she finished practicing, she was almost completely exhausted. She was covered in sweat as she used the sword to support her body. When she raised her hand to wipe her sweat, she was surprised to find that there was another person in the yard. Turin, what happened to His Highness today? She asked while panting. Master knows that you went to the heavenly fragrance house. Turin simply replied. What? Chu Qingyan was a bit surprised. Turin explained, if the little princess can think of going to a place with a lot of people, Xiao cavalry would not let go of those places. The scout happened to see you at the heavenly fragrance house. Chu Qingyan wanted to cover her face. It's over, the big ice cube knew. No wonder his attitude was so strange today. Master dislikes being lied to the most. Turin emphasized, I'll explain to him now. She ran off. Turin looked at her quickly leaving figure and shook his head with a smile. Towards the little princess, Master was already too lenient. Chapter 418. Chu Qingyan quickly ran to Xiao Su's room, but did not see him. She immediately changed direction and went to the study, but there was no trace of him inside. The courtyard was only this big. Where could he have gone? Chu Qingyan was a bit discouraged as she walked back with her head drooping. A pair of black boots suddenly appeared in front of her, looking a bit familiar. Her eyes lit up. Big ice cube. You're looking for me? Xiao Su looked at her with a calm face, no longer having the cold look from before. The person in front of her had already recovered, so Chu Qingyan was stunned by his question. She had rushed over in a hurry, wanting to explain to him, but she did not know what to explain, so she was at a loss for words. Xiao Su saw her standing there in a daze and remembered what happened before, so his face did not look right. He looked away from her and planned to leave. Just as he was about to pass by, a pair of hands suddenly grabbed his arm, looking a bit cautious. Xiao Su stopped in his tracks, not saying a word. Actually, he did not know what to say to her at this time. Just now, he had used the excuse that her moves were wrong to punish her. At this time, he was already a bit regretful. But who was he? He was once the commander of the 3 armies, an all-powerful person in the Sichuan. There was no one that could make him feel guilty. He couldn't swallow his pride and apologize no matter what. I'm sorry. Chu Qingyan mustered her courage and stammered out her apology. As soon as her voice fell, Xiao Su's body froze. This little fellow apologized to him? Why are you sorry? He subconsciously asked, but then he realized that his voice was a bit strange. After saying the most difficult words, the stone in her heart had been removed. The following words were not that hard to say, but she still did not dare to look at him. I shouldn't have lied to you. I didn't go buy anything. I went to the heavenly fragrance house with Duga Qing. She said softly. Xiao Su did not expect her to confess, so he was a bit surprised. Looking down, he could only see her back facing him. Her head was lowered, looking very docile. "What for?" he asked. Since the ice cube was paying attention to her, it meant that there was still a chance. She was slightly delighted and told him the truth. "I wanted to find out more information." Big Sister Dugu said that the Heavenly Fragrance brothel was the place with the most gossip, so we went there. "Don't be angry. I didn't mean to lie to you." From the little fellow's slightly anxious tone, it was obvious that she was very concerned about his mood. Xiao Su's brows relaxed, but when he thought of what his subordinate had reported, his brows furrowed again. "Who is that man from the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant?" He remembered that when she first came to the Jiang Kingdom, she basically went in and out with him, so it should be impossible for her to meet outsiders. When he heard from his subordinates that the little fellow was talking and laughing with him, and their behavior was somewhat intimate, he was very displeased. So when he learned that she had returned, he couldn't control himself. Chu Qingyin's face froze. These fierce blade cavalry were truly gossipy, to actually tell Big Ice Cube all of this. But the most important thing now was to appease Big Ice Cube. It could be seen that Big Ice Cube was very concerned about her casually making friends with people, probably afraid that she didn't recognize people clearly. However, in order to smoothly go out and participate in the Lawn Manors transaction, she had to conceal Higashio Motetsu's identity a little. Otherwise, if Big Ice Cube was dissatisfied and didn't let her go out, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. "I'll confess. I'll be lenient." Chu Qingyin immediately replied. "Speak." Xiao Su was very satisfied with her attitude. "That person is called Higashio Motetsu. I met him when I was in Sichuan. I don't know what he does, but he has helped me a lot. This time, when I came to the Jiang Kingdom, I didn't expect to meet him, so we chatted for a while." What she said was all true, but there were some things that she concealed a little, such as his martial arts weren't weak, and that he followed them all the way, but she didn't know what his purpose was. However, she still didn't know what Higashio Motetsu wanted to do, so she didn't want to rashly tell Big Ice Cube. After all, Higashio Motetsu didn't do anything bad. If everything was just her own guess, she didn't want to wrongly accuse a good person. Xiao Su lightly replied. Big Ice Cube isn't angry with me. She gathered her courage and raised her head to look at him, her eyes wide open, her watery eyes filled with caution. Seeing her like this, no matter how big Xiao Su's emotions were, they all disappeared in the ripples in her eyes. In fact, Xiao Su didn't care about that man's identity, but felt that a person who had no secrets in front of him suddenly had something that he didn't know about, and still hid it from him. He felt that something was wrong. "Did I say I was angry with you?" Xiao Su coldly said. "You didn't." Chu Qingyin turned around and hugged his arm tightly. She was a little confused. "But I felt that you were a little different from how you usually are." Xiao Su looked away and said unnaturally, "Did I?" Chu Qingyin narrowed her eyes, thinking that this Big Ice Cube who didn't mean what he said was really cute. No. Big Ice Cube has always been so gentle and kind, considerate and amiable. Why would he be angry? She said with a smile. Gentle and kind? Considerate and amiable? Don't talk nonsense. Xiao Su raised his hand and gave her a chestnut, but that light force didn't look like a punishment at all. Chu Qingyin pretended to cover her head and wailed, "Big Ice Cube hit someone. It's terrible." Xiao Su looked at a certain someone who was insatiable, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. However, when she ran forward and didn't forget to turn back and make a face at him, his heart sank. He knew that his behavior was a little abnormal today. But when the little fellow was close to him, he finally understood the reason. When he heard that she had lied to him and then met someone else at the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, he felt that something that belonged to him had been touched by someone else. That was his little fellow, and he wouldn't allow anyone to covet her. Ever since he was young, he had never wanted anything in particular, such as power, gold and silver, or the throne. But at this moment, he suddenly had the urge to take her into his world and not let anyone see her. Take her for himself. No, that was his to begin with. He wasn't taking it for himself, it was what he had, whether it was tyrannical or autocratic. Since he was here, there was no chance to leave. Unless he died. Big Ice Cube, what are you thinking about? The sound of cheering pulled him back from his daze. Xiao Su looked at the little fellow who wasn't even as tall as his chest. She was standing under the plum blossom tree. Her red lips and white teeth made him feel as if he was looking at his past self. What did the 10-year-old him have? Loneliness, disappointment, pain, frustration. He would never allow her to experience everything that he had. There might not be any ribs that you like to eat tonight, he said calmly. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips into a smile. Big Ice Cube was really cute. It's fine, I can eat something else, as long as you don't make me eat carrots. She bargained. No way. Humph. Autocratic, tyrannical. She made a face at him. Unfortunately, that person ignored her. Chapter 419. Can't you say something? She muttered for a while, not wanting to eat carrots anymore. She thought that she wouldn't be able to buy carrots in such a cold place like Jiang country. But who would have thought that Huo Ling and the others would specially bring carrots from another place? Only after asking did she know that it was Big Ice Cube. Why would Big Ice Cube like carrots? But if he didn't eat them, she would be the one suffering. Xiao Su softly patted her head and said with a smile, "Because you haven't grown up yet." What did he mean by haven't grown up? In a modern era, he had never heard of people desperately eating carrots to grow up. I don't want to eat carrots. I don't want to become a rabbit, Chu Qingyan said with a sad face. Xiao Su curled his lips. In his eyes, she was just a rabbit that hadn't grown up yet. At the table, seeing her unworried face and obediently eating carrots, Xiao Su remembered the first time she was poisoned. Master, Miss Chu's body doesn't seem to be very good. Ethereal checked her pulse before standing in front of him and saying this. What do you mean? He asked. This subordinate found that Chu Qingyan's eyes are not very clear at night, so it should have been brought out from her mother's womb. Is there any way to treat it? There isn't one right now, but this subordinate will do his best to research a way. After a while, Master, this subordinate has found a way to treat Miss Chu's eyes. Tell me about it. As long as Miss Chu eats carrots for 5 years, she will be cured. If her condition is discovered early, she will be cured early. Good. From today onwards, have the kitchen prepare carrots for every meal. Also, don't tell a third person about this. In other words, don't let her know. She was still young and might be scared. Yes. So 5 years later, when she was of marriageable age, the dishes she ate from carrots could be compiled into a thick encyclopedia of carrots. Stir-fried carrots, stir-fried bacon with carrots, stewed pork ribs with carrots, salted carrots with rice. When she complained while eating carrots, she didn't know that she was actually using food therapy. She also didn't know that the ancient people had discovered night blindness so early and how to treat it. It could only be said that the ancient people's wisdom was truly amazing. Chu Qingyan, who didn't want to turn into a rabbit, suddenly covered her face after eating. It hurt so much that she almost rolled on the ground. Big Ice Cube, my teeth hurt. Chu Qingyan's eyes as she looked at him with teary eyes. Calm teeth ache wasn't an illness, but it hurt her to die. Chu Qingyan's small face was contorted. It was obvious that she was at her limit. Xiao Su's face turned cold. Send a message. When Huo Ling saw this scene, he immediately went down to call Kong Ling over. Cheng Yin Luo, who had heard about the incident in the courtyard, also came over. Chu's halves have it. It was a false alarm. Everyone retreated. Those who needed to brew medicine, those who needed to eat, and those who needed to patrol went on patrol. It was a small matter, but depending on who it happened to, it could be a big or small matter. Before the medicine was ready, Chu Qingyan was still in so much pain that she wanted to roll on the ground. In the modern era, she often went to the hospital because of tooth decay. She didn't want to experience this kind of heart-wrenching pain again. In ancient times, she had protected her teeth very well. She didn't expect that it would hurt like this even without tooth decay. Big Ice Cube, my teeth hurt. Other than this, she didn't know what else to say. It hurt so much that she was delirious. Xiao Su looked at her hand, covering half her face. Her eyes were watery, and he felt pity for her. He pulled her into his arms and patted her back without saying a word. He wasn't good at comforting people. He could only let her come closer to him instinctively. Chu Qingyan leaned on his shoulder, looking pitiful and aggrieved. This kind of pain was indescribable. Big ice cube, why don't you knock me out? Maybe I won't feel the pain after I fall asleep. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and disgust with him. Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her words. However, he could feel that she was really in pain. Bear with it a little longer. The medicine will be here soon. He caressed her back and added, if you really can't take it anymore, bite my shoulder. Perhaps it was really painful. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a pressure on his shoulder. Then there was a slight pain in his. He scoffed. It seemed that his little fellow was not only a rabbit, but also a dog. If Chu Qingyan knew what he was thinking, she would probably retort that even a rabbit would bite when cornered. When Xining came over with the medicine and saw her master's evil deeds, she was so scared that she almost spilled the medicine. After drinking the medicine, Chu Qingyan's toothache temporarily subsided by 50% or 60%. For the first time, Chu Qingyan felt that the medicine tasted so good. Xiao Su looked at the person sitting quietly on the chair and asked worriedly, does it still hurt? Chu Qingyan covered half of her face and looked up. She nodded at him. It still hurts. It hurts so much. Bear with it. If every soldier on a battlefield was injured like you, there wouldn't be any need to fight. Xiao Su teased her, trying to distract her. The more she paid attention to the pain, the more the pain would be magnified. I'm not a soldier. Besides, I'm a girl. I have the right to cry out in pain. Chu Qingyan, who was on the verge of weakness, revealed a rare girlish side of her. Xiao Su shook his head, finding it funny. Perhaps it was because she was chatting with the big ice cube that she didn't feel so painful. Her gaze inadvertently landed on his shoulder, where the saliva had soaked it. Her cheeks heated up, and she felt a little embarrassed. Big ice cube, does your shoulder hurt? Xiao Su said unconcernedly, it's nothing. Chu Qingyan thought that he was right. As a man, this bit of pain was nothing. However, after a long time, when the two of them were naked and she saw the clear teeth mark on his shoulder, she realized how hard she had bitten him back then. Are you feeling guilty? Then shouldn't this prince ask for compensation for the teeth mark? Chu Qingyan, who was immersed in the fact that she had left a mark on his body all those years ago, did not notice that a certain person had turned into a wolf. Then, he suddenly flipped her over and ate her clean. When Chu Qingyan woke up the next day, she saw that her body was covered in ambiguous marks. On the same spot on her shoulder, there was also a fresh teeth mark. She wanted to cry on the spot. She had to pay for what she did. Perhaps it was because of this toothache. After recovering from her illness for a few days, Chu Qingyan told Xiao Su that she wanted to go out to play. Xiao Su generously let her go again. 2 days were up. She pulled Du Guqing, who was acting as her cover, and Jean Exant, who was accompanying her to protect her, towards the place where she had agreed to meet with Higashio Motetsu. Chapter 420. When they arrived at the agreed place, Higashio Motetsu was already there. Chu Qingyan didn't stay any longer. She asked Jean Exant to stay by Du Guqing's side to ensure that she would return safely before leaving with Higashio Motetsu. Little rascal, aren't you worried that your master will be abducted and sold? Du Guqing looked at the direction where the two people disappeared and asked, as a subordinate, I will obey my master's orders. Moreover, my master is very smart. Only she can abduct others. No one can abduct her. Jean Exant said methodically. Du Guqing chuckled and said, foolish loyalty. But as soon as her words fell, Jean Exant turned around and left. Du Guqing touched her nose. Was this little rascal so fragile? Hey, little rascal, sister is just joking with you. Don't take it seriously. Du Guqing immediately followed. Jean Exant looked back at her expressionlessly. This one is going to help my master buy some pastries. Also, this one has a name, Jean Exant, not a little rascal. Okay, this little rascal is really cold. Du Guqing heard that the last time she brought Chu Qingyan back, Chu Qingyan was punished by Xiao Su. At that time, she was puzzled in her heart. This Xiao Su was simply treating Chu Qingyan as his own possession. But such a cold guy, only Chu Qingyan could stand it. If it was her, she would have already hung herself with noodles. So this time, Jean Xin listened to his master's order and bought the pastries first, so that he could report back and not be seen through by Xiao Su. The two people on this side were going to the pastry shop, while the two people on the other side were already far away. Dongting, what are we doing here? When Higashio Motetsu brought her to a restaurant, Chu Qingyan was puzzled. This young master, and they agreed to meet here. Later, they will inform you where the meeting place is. Don't worry, accompany this young master to drink a bowl of tofu pudding. The tofu pudding here is very good. Higashio Motetsu said and didn't care about her expression and directly walked in. Chu Qingyan heard the shouts coming from inside as she watched the figure walk in. She had no choice but to follow him in. She thought that with Higashio Motetsu's temperament, he would choose a private room. But she didn't expect that he had already sat down in the lobby and saw her come in and waved his hand at her. Chu Qingyan facepalmed. With such a devilishly handsome face, it would be bad if he came out to scare people instead of staying at home. She would rather he go to the private room than face so many hot. I found that you were a gathering place for gossip. After Chu Qingyan sat down, she shook her head at him. Wherever he was, there would be infatuated women and whispering behind his back. When Higashio Motetsu heard this, he raised his phoenix eyes and looked around. Those women who were originally staring at him saw him look over and immediately lowered their heads. Some of the bolder ones even threw him a coquettish glance. Higashio Motetsu turned his gaze back to Chu Qingyan in front of him and smiled contentedly. Little girl, can I take it that you are praising me? Chu Qingyan glanced at the person who took advantage of her and wanted to ignore him, not knowing how long they would have to wait. Chu Qingyan simply observed the people in the restaurant. Because it was not mealtime, there were not many people eating. So in the large hall, there were only a few tables. There were passers-by who were in a hurry to eat and were preparing to leave. There were also people who were chatting with friends in groups of 3 to 5. There were also people who were wearing bamboo hats and eating leisurely. There was also an elegant man who was drinking alone. Chu Qingyan's gaze fell on the elegant man. His hair was as soft as the spring breeze in February, and his eyebrows were drawn with strokes. His eyes were bright, and he was wearing a sapphire blue brocade robe. His movements were elegant, but he did not stop drinking. It was as if he was drinking tea instead of wine. Just as she was seriously looking at him, a pair of claws flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Qingyan withdrew her gaze and stared at Higashio Motetsu, but he was the one who complained first. Little girl, why are you looking at others? Could it be that other people can compare to this young master's looks? Higashio Motetsu held his heart and looked like a resentful wife, as if his husband had been seduced by some other ghost. Chu Qingyan shook off the goosebumps all over her body. She was both amused and angry as she said, Dongting, can you not say such disgusting words? You're a dignified 9 feet tall man, okay? Show the courage that a man should have, okay? Don't be so narrow-minded, okay? TSK, you don't understand this young master's humor. Higashio Motetsu lamented in a lonely manner. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes. Pretend, keep pretending. As if responding to Chu Qingyan's inner thoughts, Higashio Motetsu's expression returned to normal. He looked at the person that Chu Qingyan was sizing up with a smile. You have good eyesight. Do you know who he is? From his tone, that person did not seem to be a simple person. She asked, who is it? Beg me. Higashio Motetsu repeated his old trick with a sly smile. Chu Qingyan felt that his method of keeping her in suspense was a disease that needed to be cured. Say it or not, Chu Qingyan did not want to waste time with him. Higashio Motetsu felt that this little girl was getting harder and harder to tease. He smiled faintly. Do you still remember the matter of the Jiang Kingdom's princess breaking off the engagement? That person happened to be one of the parties involved. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up in surprise. She looked at Higashio Motetsu in surprise, then looked at the man who was still drinking alone. She said in disbelief, he's that second young master Tang. That's right. He's the second young master of the Tang family, Tang Qingchong. Higashio Motetsu nodded. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Qingyan could not help but click her tongue. This second young Master Tang is handsome and well-dressed. Why would the third princess give up such a good tree? This was the first time he heard her praise someone. Higashio Motetsu was a little jealous. Wasn't he more handsome than Tang Qingchong? Why didn't the little girl praise him? But when he heard the little girl's next words, Higashio Motetsu almost choked on his own saliva. Could it be that such an excellent seedling doesn't love a beautiful woman, but loves a homosexual? So the third princess resolutely broke off the engagement on the day of the wedding when she found out about it. If you put it that way, it makes sense. Chu Qingyin's imagination was running wild at the side, and she did not notice that the people around her were shocked by her shocking words. As if sensing Chu Qingyin's strange gaze, Tang Qingchong paused in the middle of pouring the wine and turned to look at her. His eyes were very clear. She could tell that he was an upright person. This was Chu Qingyin's first impression of him when she looked directly at him. Tang Qingchong only saw a boy in his early teens looking at him with an inquisitive look. He thought that this was another person who was curious about the broken engagement. Over the past year, he had become accustomed to such gazes. The wine in his mouth was tasteless. He put down the wine jug. His head was a little dizzy. He put the money on the table and got up to leave. Drowning his sorrows in wine made him even more sorrowful. Little girl, he's here. Who's here? Chapter 421. The messenger is here. Higashio Motetsu's voice had a hint of seriousness. Before Chu Qingyin could react, she saw him put the bowl of tofu pudding on the table. There were a few words written at the bottom of the bowl. East Dragon Pavilion in the western suburbs. This is... Chu Qingyin furrowed her brows. At this time, Higashio Motetsu had already pulled her up and said without hesitation, "We only have less than an hour. We have to hurry." She didn't know if he meant to hurry or if he wanted her to hold onto his hand. This was not the time to care about small details. After the two left, the waiter who called them came forward to clean up the table. They really are two handsome young masters. The waiter was about to reach for the bowl, but before he could touch it, the bowl instantly shattered into powder. The two didn't stop for a second and headed straight to the western suburbs. Chu Qingyin didn't know the way, but that didn't mean that Higashio Motetsu, who had been wandering around the capital for many days, didn't know the way. The two arrived at the East Dragon Pavilion in the western suburbs within the set time. When they were not far from the pavilion, Higashio Motetsu unexpectedly stopped. "What's wrong?" Chu Qingyin already saw the pavilion, but she didn't know what Higashio Motetsu was thinking. "You've decided? You really want to go?" Higashio Motetsu looked at her seriously. "We're only one step away. What are you waiting for?" She was not used to his sudden seriousness. She glanced at him and joked with Chu Qingyin. "It's not as simple as you think. You decided to go?" Higashio Motetsu saw that she was in a good mood and smiled, but he still couldn't help but ask. It wasn't his first time going to the Lawn Manor, but he was a bit worried because of the news he received last night. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. "I, Chu Qingyin, am not the type of person to cower." Chu Qingyin patted her chest, as if she was the only one who could do it. Just as she finished speaking, she looked suspiciously at Dongting Wangyu and said, "I say, Dongting, could it be that you were scared after coming here? If you don't want to go, give me the invitation. I can go alone." This little girl actually dared to look down on him? Higashio Motetsu snorted coldly. If it wasn't for her safety, he wouldn't have cared so much. What a joke. Am I, Higashio Motetsu, that kind of person? Let's go, it's almost time. Higashio Motetsu strode forward, no longer wasting time with her. Chu Qingyin shrugged and quickly followed him. There's no one here. The two of them stood in the pavilion, but there was no one around. On such a cold day, if they weren't passers-by, few people would deliberately come out. As soon as Chu Qingyin finished speaking, she heard the sound of clothes fluttering and carriage wheels rolling. She turned her head and saw several men dressed as servants driving a carriage towards them. "Dare I ask what the word wind corresponds to?" the leader asked in a clear voice. "Eat, drink, and be merry." Higashio Motetsu replied without hesitation. Chu Qingyin stood to the side and listened to the two people asking and answering questions. It turned out that this was the secret signal. Hearing these 8 words, it covered the various meanings of this transaction. Congratulations, you've answered correctly. Please cover your eyes. The leader waved his hand, and 2 men walked towards them with black ribbons. Chu Qingyin asked Higashio Motetsu with her eyes. Higashio Motetsu was blindfolded and slowly said, "In order to guarantee the transaction, no one knows where we are going." At this time, her eyes were also covered. The texture of the ribbons on her face was very comfortable. If she was not mistaken, these were rare silk ribbons. They were very generous. But after sighing, Chu Qingyin felt a trace of nervousness, or it could be said that she was looking forward to it. Being helped into the carriage, Chu Qingyin and Higashio Motetsu just sat down when the carriage began to move. The blindfolded 2 people did not know where they were being taken to. The 2 of them were silent. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the carriage finally stopped. The 2 people were also asked to come down, but the ribbons on their faces could not be removed. They were supported for a while. When they came down from the carriage, Chu Qingyin felt a bone-piercing cold wind blowing against her face. But before she could take 2 steps, she was surrounded by warmth. The surroundings were quiet. Besides the sound of their footsteps, she could not hear any other sound. "We've arrived," the leader's voice sounded. Chu Qingyin consciously took off her ribbons. Suddenly, there was a burst of light. Her eyes could not accept such a strong light. Chu Qingyin could not help but close her eyes, waiting for her eyes to adjust before she dared to open them. She saw that she was in a room. The decorations on all sides were not ordinary. Candles flickered. Because the room was not big, it was very bright. The surroundings were very quiet, as if this was really just a room for people to rest. It had nothing to do with the mysterious transaction. She turned sideways and saw Higashio Motetsu sitting in the room. "This is the underground lawn manor? Are we going out?" Saying that, she walked towards the door. "Right now is not the time for the transaction. You can't leave." As soon as Higashio Motetsu's words fell, Chu Qingyin placed her hand on the door. She gently pulled, but did not budge. It was just as Higashio Motetsu said. There really was no way out of this room. The people who came to participate are not worried that if Lawn Manor wants to harm them, they will be like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Chu Qingyin turned around and asked with a puzzled expression, "You're thinking too much." Since Lawn Manor can do such a big thing and attract so many famous people, there must be something special about it. They are honest and trustworthy. They protect the privacy of every participant. That is what they do best. Higashio Motetsu looked at her with a chuckle. Chu Qingyin rubbed her nose. From his tone, it seemed like she had asked a very stupid question. But this time, she saw Higashio Motetsu holding a piece of paper in his hand. She couldn't help but move closer. "What is this?" "A list left behind by Lawn Manor's people. It records the items that are going to be traded today. You can decide where you want to go based on the items on the list." Higashio Motetsu handed the paper in his hand to her. "You can decide where you want to go later. Here in Lawn Manor, there are many rooms. Every room had a sign hanging on it. The people inside were all people who were going to be trading. As long as they were looking for something, they could directly talk to the owner of the room and discuss it. It had to be said that this method was simple and fast. It prevented them from finding a needle in a haystack and missing the item they wanted to trade." When Chu Qingyin's gaze fell on the voluminous black and white words on the paper, she was completely dumbfounded. There were actually no less than 100 rooms. If you thought that there was only one owner in each room, you were wrong. Lawn Manor's planning was based on the similarities and differences of the items being traded. For example, in this armory, there were no less than a dozen owners, each holding different weapons that they wanted to trade. Higashio Motetsu looked at her seriously, choosing, and didn't rush her. "I've chosen." Chu Qingyin suddenly opened her mouth. Higashio Motetsu raised his eyebrows and looked at her. The people who participated in Lawn Manor could only enter 3 rooms at a time. In other words, there were only 3 chances. He was very doubtful that this little girl would be able to choose the right room. Chapter 422. At this time, Higashio Motetsu was also a little curious as to which 3 rooms she would choose. He saw her holding a vermilion pen and circling the words on the paper. Amusing, a basket of medicinal herbs. When Higashio Motetsu saw these 2 names, he couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. This Lan Zhuang's naming skills were becoming more and more out of tune. But when his line of sight moved to the 2 rooms, he couldn't help but smile. This little girl's intelligence couldn't be underestimated. What about the other one? When Higashio Motetsu saw that there was no movement after circling 2 rooms, he couldn't help but ask. Chu Qingyin put down the pen and blinked her eyes. There are only 3 chances. How can I use them all at once? It's better to be prepared. She was a person who always prepared a perfect plan. She couldn't guarantee that she would be able to get what she wanted in these 2 rooms. But if she did, then wouldn't she have wasted the 3rd room? If there was no result in the 2 rooms, then she could make adjustments according to the situation. Chu Qingyin's wit made Higashio Motetsu have a whole new level of respect for her. If it wasn't for the fact that you don't know how to shrink bones, I would have thought that the one standing in front of me wasn't a 10-year-old. Then you should treat me like a 10-year-old child. I'm very fragile. Chu Qingyin blinked her eyes at him, deliberately showing an innocent and toothless appearance. Higashio Motetsu chuckled, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. I think you're the best at this. Chu Qingyin raised her eyebrows and graciously accepted the compliment. That's right, what did you bring? He didn't have time to properly ask her before, but now that he had some free time while waiting, he planned to ask her. Seeing Higashio Motetsu's eyes fall on the small bag on her back, Chu Qingyin tightened her grip on it. She did not intend to reveal it. I can't tell you about it. You will see it later. Keep it a little mysterious. The way the little girl protected her treasure made him even more curious, but he wasn't the kind of person who liked to force others. Moreover, as long as there was a trade, he would know what she brought sooner or later. Little girl, let me make it clear to you first. The things that can be traded here are all extraordinary things. Even if you find what you want to trade, if you don't have something of equivalent value to trade, you can only stand aside and watch. Don't worry, I won't return empty-handed, Chu Qingyin said confidently. Chu Qingyin naturally understood Higashio Motetsu's reminder, but since she dared to come, it proved that she was fully prepared. Hearing her say so, Higashio Motetsu did not say anything more. And it was almost time, because Chu Qingyin heard footsteps approaching. Sure enough, the door was opened, and 2 tall and powerful men in black wearing ghost masks walked in. One of them took away the paper on the table, and after confirming with Chu Qingyin, he gave them 3 small plaques. On the plaques were written, "Funny, basket of herbs," and a blank plaque. The other person gave them 2 masks in his hand, indicating that they should wear them. Higashio Motetsu put on the mask and explained to her, in order to protect the interests and privacy of the guests, both sides of the trade don't know what the other side looks like. This is also the reason why Lan Zhuang has been able to exist for so long. Chu Qingyin nodded and also put on the mask. Although wearing the mask only revealed a pair of eyes, she still felt a little uncomfortable. However, this discomfort was temporary, and she could accept it. It's almost time. Let this servant bring the 2 of you to the trading hall. One of the 2 men in black withdrew, and the other stood at the door to guide the 2 of them. Chu Qingyin and Higashio Motetsu followed the men in black out the door. As soon as they went out, Chu Qingyin saw that there were also rooms on the left and right sides of a room. When she came out, there were also many people wearing masks coming out of the rooms. These people looked straight ahead and did not care who walked past them. They followed the men in black without distraction. This corridor was very long, and there were rooms on both sides. Chu Qingyin estimated that there were at least 100 rooms, but she did not know if there were any other rooms other than here. Chu Qingyin finally understood why the guests were allowed to choose the rooms they wanted to go to in advance. It was mainly to distribute them. Among these people, some were dressed luxuriously and had elegant manners. Some were dressed ordinarily and had extraordinary temperaments. Some had long sabers at their waists, and some were thin and weak, as if they were harmless. According to Higashio Motetsu, to be able to participate in the trade, they had to be able to pay at least 5,000 taels of silver, or they had to be famous and skilled in a particular field to be valued by Lan Zhuang's pavilion master, who made an exception to let them in. Why are there so many people? Chu Qingyan asked in a low voice. Higashio Motetsu replied in a low voice. These people are not only from Jiang country, but also from all over the world. Every trade at Lan Zhuang attract people from all over the world, and the items for each trade are basically different. Some people do not find what they want this time, so they will participate in the next trade. And this time, it is the grandest trade in the past 3 years. In the past, there were at most 50 rooms for each trade, but this time, the number has doubled, and the number of people participating has increased a lot from the previous 100. Higashio Motetsu only said a few points, but Chu Qingyan understood. No wonder these people were dressed in all kinds of clothes. It was because they came from different places. She unconsciously narrowed her eyes. It seemed that this was really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Whether they could find the ice crystal flower or not, they would have to depend on this. Chu Qingyan remained silent and did not speak again. Higashio Motetsu only glanced at her and also silently followed the black-clothed man's lead. At the end of the corridor, there was a dazzling white light. Chu Qingyan thought that this should be the trading hall. After walking into the white light, she opened her eyes. There were at least 300 to 400 people in the bustling crowd. Those black-clothed men who led the way did not go forward, but spontaneously walked to various places in the hall and began to monitor and guard. Chu Qingyan looked around. It could be said that there was a guard every 5 steps, and these guards were tall and strong. Their steps were steady, and it could be seen that they were all experts. With such tight security, there was no need to be afraid of people plotting against them. In front of the trading hall, there were several signboards. Chu Qingyan and Higashio Motetsu went forward to take a look. On the signboards were the directions to each room. Chu Qingyan felt a sense of familiarity. Weren't these the directions to the scenic spots when they went out for a trip? The idea of the person who designed these directions was really advanced. Chu Qingyan did not think too much about it and found 2 rooms with baskets of medicinal herbs. Then, she and Higashio Motetsu went to the nearest room with baskets of medicinal herbs. Before they reached the door, they saw that the room was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Chu Qingyan clicked her tongue and could not help but raise her head to look at the signboard. She wanted to double-check if there were baskets of medicinal herbs. But in her ear, she heard Higashio Motetsu say, "This medicinal herb trading room is the most popular place for Lan Zhuang's transactions." Hearing that, Chu Qingyan immediately pulled Higashio Motetsu and squeezed in. "We can't fall behind. What if someone else beat them to it?" Only to hear Higashio Motetsu scream, "Little girl, take it easy, my image ah." Chapter 423. The basket of herbs in his hand had already been handed over to the black-clothed man at the side. Chu Qingyan pulled Higashio Motetsu and squeezed into the room. Higashio Motetsu complained incessantly. His good clothes had been squeezed until they were crooked. Unfortunately, the person pulling his wrist seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. She didn't slow down for a moment as she walked towards the first table. He raised his hand and took advantage of the time to straighten his clothes. In this crowded place, he suddenly felt the softness of his wrist. He lowered his head to look at that small hand. It had a girl's slender and tender hand. At this time, she was afraid that the 2 of them would get lost, so she tightly held on to him. Higashio Motetsu's gaze followed her hand up little by little. Today, she was wearing a man's white robe with blue patterns. Although her facial features were covered by a mask, he could still feel her petite and delicate vitality. She was still young, and he couldn't see what she would look like when she grew up. But he had a premonition that she would definitely not be mediocre. At this time, the little girl didn't notice his undisguised gaze. Her heart was completely focused on the stall owners. Higashio Motetsu was a little jealous. He didn't know what this Xiao had done to be able to obtain her heartfelt support. His phoenix eyes slightly narrowed. A dark light flashed in his eyes and quickly disappeared into the depths of his eyes. Chu Qingyan at this time began a carpet search. Every time she walked past a table, her eyes would glance at the table. Very quickly, she had skipped over many tables. The reason why baskets of herbs were so popular was because people's bodies would always have illnesses. Moreover, the more power one had in their hands, the higher the chance of being harmed. Thus, there would be more people looking for rare herbs. This is the most chaotic transaction I have ever seen. Higashio Motetsu sighed. He felt that this kind of crowded environment was not suitable for a noble person like him. The more people there were, the more transactions there were. Arguments over the same medicinal herbs could be found everywhere. Here, there was no distinction between high and low. There was only a competition to see who was faster, more accurate, and more ruthless. It was Chu Qingyin's first time participating in this kind of transaction. She completely regarded it as a flea market. Moreover, she was used to going shopping in the mall with her friends during the holidays. Wherever there was a discount, she would go there. She had completely adapted to this transaction model, so she didn't have as many exclamations as Higashio Motetsu. Most of the tables he had browsed earlier were filled with pills that could increase one's inner strength or treat various ailments. Although they were quite rare, they were nothing compared to the pills developed by Ethereal and Chung Yen Luo. As expected, one's outlook would change depending on the people around them. Therefore, the quality of one's friends would determine one's level of advancement. In half an hour, they had browsed through 1/3 of the large room. Chu Qingyin finally stopped to rest for a while. There were so many people. Even if it was winter, the rising carbon dioxide would still raise the temperature. Higashio Motetsu felt her hand loosen and moved away. He felt an inexplicable sense of loss in his heart, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. Instead, he looked around. At this time, most of the people had already left. The door, which had been bustling with activity earlier, was now empty. There were dozens of tables in this room. The little girl had spent half an hour looking for nearly 20 tables. She didn't just look around in a hurry. He could see that her gaze was very sharp. She had thought carefully before leaving. He felt that she was the only one at her age who could be as steady and intelligent as her. Dong Ting here. She took a deep breath and took out 2 water bags from the bag on her back. She handed one to him and drank the other one alone. Then, she wiped her lips and said, "Continue." Higashio Motetsu didn't expect that she would actually bring her own water. He felt a little incredulous. That was because he didn't know Chu Qingyin well. She remembered that one year, when she went shopping with her best friend on National Day, they each brought 2 bottles of water. It was very tiring to crazily buy water. If they didn't replenish their energy, how could they compete with those uncles and aunties who often square danced? There weren't many people left. Chu Qingyin minded her own business and walked to the next table. Higashio Motetsu looked at her back and then looked at the water bag in his hand. He hesitated for a moment, then unscrewed the cork and took a sip. It was a little sour and sweet, like the juice of fruits. Not only could it quench his thirst, but it could also satisfy his hunger. He had to admit that the little girl was very thoughtful. Chu Qingyin walked in front of the table and saw a 100-year snow lotus planted in a transparent ice cube. Each petal was sparkling and translucent, and a white fog was rising around it. It was as if one could see a snowy mountain sealed in ice and covered in snow. It was very ethereal. Chu Qingyin was attracted by it. She heard from Yin Luo that the 1,000-year-old snow lotus was rare in the world. Even a 100-year-old snow lotus was rare. Now that she saw it, Chu Qingyin felt that the snow lotus not only had good medicinal effects, but also had high aesthetic value. "Hello, I want to ask if you have ice crystal flower or love grass." Since this person had such a precious 100-year-old snow lotus, she didn't know if he had the 2 things she needed. The stall owner saw that she was a little surprised by the snow lotus, but didn't come for it. His tone was a little rude. Ice crystal flower and love grass only exist in medical books. Almost no one has seen them. What's more, love grass lives in the morning and dies in the evening. It's impossible for it to appear here. You'd better not waste your time. Higashio Motetsu heard this and guessed that the little girl was going to be angry. She cared about these 2 herbs so much. How could she allow others to say that? He crossed his arms and waited for a good show. Chu Qingyin heard the man's tone and felt unhappy. No one wanted to be dampened by others. She didn't hurry to leave. She looked at the stall owner secretly. Her eyes swept over the broken finger on his right hand. Then she looked away and asked, "May I ask what you want to exchange this snow lotus for?" The snow lotus was so precious, it should have been traded away a long time ago. Unfortunately, his snow lotus was still there, and the people standing next to it were all afraid of it. Then there was only one possibility. The thing he wanted to trade was equally precious. The stall owner replied stiffly, "Dream flower." Dream flower? This information suddenly popped up in Chu Qingyin's mind. Dream flower could cause people to hallucinate and let the consumer die in a beautiful dream. One type was used for murder, causing people to die unknowingly. The other type was used for people who were suffering so much that they could spend their last days in pain and sorrow. "What are you doing it for?" Chu Qingyin asked without thinking. The stall owner was a little impatient with other people's questions, but when he met her bright and inexplicably dignified eyes, he was slightly taken aback. His fingers curled, and he said in a low voice, "For my wife." Chu Qingyin smiled. "I'm afraid you won't find the dream flower here, but there might be a surprise in Kuan Mountain." With that, Chu Qingyin prepared to leave. The stall owner's eyes lit up. His hands trembled slightly. He looked down at the snow lotus and said, "Wait." Chapter 424. With her back facing the stall owner, Chu Qingyin curled her lips mysteriously. Then, she turned around and resumed her innocent and harmless expression. "What's the matter?" she asked naturally. "I don't know about the ice crystal flower, but I know about the love grass," the stall owner said stiffly. The stall owner's words stunned Higashio Motetsu, who was watching from the side. He narrowed his eyes. "How did this little girl do it? I'd like to hear the details." Chu Qingyin suppressed the excitement in her heart and tried to make her voice sound normal. The stall owner nodded and said, 20 years ago, I once had the seed of the love grass in my hands, but I couldn't grow it. Later on, by chance, I gave it to a highly respected doctor in Shang country. However, I heard that he has already passed away. I don't know what happened after that." "Who is that doctor?" Chu Qingyin stepped forward and asked. "It's not convenient for me to reveal that. If you have the heart, you will naturally be able to find him," the stall owner replied. Chu Qingyin remembered the rules of this lawn manor. The two parties involved in the transaction could not reveal their identities. Otherwise, they would be punished for violating the rules. "No matter what, thank you." She suppressed her surprise and excitement and thanked him sincerely. "I should be the one thanking you." The stall owner did not talk much with her. Instead, he carried Shuoyin and turned to leave. Chu Qingyin looked at his back view as he left in a hurry. She felt a little emotional. Another infatuated person. Witnessing this dramatic turn of events, Higashio Motetsu walked up and asked, "How did you know about the dream flower's whereabouts? And how did you know that he knew about the love grass?" Chu Qingyin knew that he would ask this question. She did not hide it and whispered to him in a voice that both of them could hear. "I've heard a friend mention the dream flower before. She's also a healer. She mentioned the dream flower because there's a 100 Herbs mountain lord with superb medical skills in the pugilistic world. For the past 2 years, he's been searching for the dream flower all over the world to alleviate his wife's pain. He had heard of this 100 Herb mountain lord before, but he did not know that he was looking for the dreamy flower. However, after hearing her words and the stall owner's answer, he was certain that Chu Qingyin had mistaken him for the 100 Herb mountain lord. Higashio Motetsu asked in a rare moment of confusion, "Then how can you be sure that he is the 100 Herb mountain lord?" His right pinky finger was amputated when he was young. Just now, I saw that the stall owner's pinky finger was also amputated. Plus, we don't know each other, so there's no need for him to hide it from me. So, I'm very sure that he's the 100 Herb mountain lord," Chu Qingyin said confidently. Higashio Motetsu stopped smiling and stared at the person in front of him. At such a young age, she was already observant and could deduce the entire matter from a small point. If it was anyone else, they would not be as smart and quick-witted as her. Congratulations, you've obtained a clue. Furthermore, he had obtained it effortlessly. This made him somewhat convinced. Thank you. Chu Qingyin was beaming with joy. She did not expect to achieve victory so quickly. Although she did not know who the doctor from the Shang Nation was, and she did not know if the seed was still there, it was better than having no clue at all. At least she knew where the love grass seed was last seen, and she could provide the Xiao Lai cavalry with some useful information. Compared to Chu Qingyin's joy, Higashio Motetsu was very calm. Although she got a clue about the love grass, Chu Qingyin did not let go of the next table. She would rather kill 3,000 by mistake than let go of one. Just as Chu Qingyin walked to a table, someone happened to be trading. Chu Qingyin's mood was a lot better at this time, and she had the leisure to look at what the other party was trading. A man dressed in black took the snow muscle pill and looked at it, and then returned it to the stall owner. He then opened the box on his body. It was a Chinese knotweed. Looking at the color, it should be many years old. At this time, the stall owner said something to the black masked man standing beside him. The black masked man then led the two people to the door. In the blue equipment, private transactions were not allowed. Once both sides confirmed the transaction, they had to go to the notary office to hand over the things to the people of Lawn Manor. When the transaction was over, they could take their things. Moreover, those who did not need to trade would be led to a room by the people of Lawn Manor to rest until the transaction was over. This was also to ensure that those who succeeded in the transaction would not turn around halfway and destroy the bridge after crossing the river, affecting the progress of the transaction. Chu Qingyin could not help but admire the meticulousness of the people of Lawn Manor who set up these mechanisms. No wonder so many people came alone without worry. However, when the black-clothed man brushed past her, their gazes met in midair. She felt that the man suddenly narrowed his eyes and took a deep look at her before leaving with the people from Lawn Manor. Chu Qingyin's heart thumped. When she looked at the black-masked man again, he only left her with his back. When she noticed his clothes, Chu Qingyin seemed to have something flashed in her mind, but it disappeared quickly. She did not catch on to anything. She felt inexplicably uneasy, but she couldn't tell why. Subconsciously, she remembered the things he had just exchanged. When she went back, she would ask Yin Luo what they were for. Just as Chu Qingyin was lost in thought, Higashio Motetsu said impatiently, "You're so mesmerized by a shameless man. You're too useless." Chu Qingyin couldn't help but roll her eyes. What was he talking about? Chu Qingyin put this matter aside for the time being and turned to the other tables. The medicinal herbs here were placed all over the room as if they were free. Any one of them was priceless. They were all rare and precious herbs that were hard to buy with money. Chu Qingyin felt that she was lucky to be able to see so many medicinal herbs at the same time in her life. Unfortunately, after asking around, no one knew about the ice crystal flower or the love grass. Chu Qingyin was a little disappointed. However, these two herbs were really rare, and it wasn't easy to find out their whereabouts. Thus, she left with Xiao Su and headed to the amusing room. Chu Qingyin secretly prayed that she would be able to find out the whereabouts of the ice crystal flower on this trip. When they arrived at the entrance of the amusing room, Chu Qingyin calmly handed the small token in her hand to the masked man at the door. Then, she led Higashio Motetsu to the stall owner that she had already identified. Due to her strong sense of purpose, she quickly found the table. However, the table was already surrounded by people. Chu Qingyin wasn't in a hurry. She pulled the reluctant Higashio Motetsu and squeezed through the crowd again. Higashio Motetsu wailed for the second time today, and also for the second time in his life. Oh, his image. Every time, it was so unexpected. Couldn't they have told him in advance? Chapter 425. When Chu Qingyin and Higashio Motetsu squeezed to the front, the stall owner at the table was talking to one of the masked people who wanted to trade. They could only hear their conversation. Please look at what this one has brought. The slightly stooped trader wearing the guan yu mask slowly took out a box from his sleeve. Everyone's gaze fell on his box, waiting for him to slowly open it. The guan yu mask trader lived up to everyone's expectations and opened the box. Inside was a fist-sized golden peony flower. From the appearance, it looked like a woman's head ornament. Chu Qingyin looked at the golden peony flower and then looked at the card on the table. On it was written, all-knowing scholar of Jianghu. Lan Zhuang did not allow stall owners and traders to reveal their true identities, but there was one exception. That was the famous all-knowing scholar of Jianghu. He was known as the #1 person in the world who knew everything from astronomy to geography. He was omniscient and omnipotent. This all-knowing scholar of Jianghu did not have an undeserved reputation. He had a group of subordinates who were skilled in the art of invisibility. They were scattered all over the world and weaved a dense intelligence network for him. Every day, they would provide him with the latest news. No matter which concubine the emperor favored last night, or which flower petal the concubine used to bathe today, he knew everything. The information in his hands ranged from the small fights between the large sects to the deep secrets of the nobles. Even though he did not have any power, he was enough to make people fear him. Because he had secrets that people did not want to know. He made people hate and fear him, but no one dared to make a move against him. He did not know martial arts, but he had 10 experts protecting him. Any one of them was a famous person in Jianghu that made people fear him. So before they made a move, they had to weigh their own weight and see if they could match up to even a finger of the other person. It was said that he was a rare handsome youth in Jianghu. When he appeared in Jianghu a few years ago, he attracted countless women to kneel at his feet. It was a pity that he was too arrogant and did not put them in his eyes. Fortunately, this all-knowing scholar of Jianghu had not involved himself in Jianghu for many years. It was said that he was henpecked and married a domineering beauty. Recently, he had been trying to please his wife and make babies. He did not care about worldly affairs. But these were all rumors, and no one could prove it. Maybe it was those who were oppressed by him and were about to go crazy. They added oil and vinegar to make themselves feel better. So other than the occasional person who spent a lot of money to buy information from him, very few people saw him show his face. In the past few years, if they wanted to see him, it was Lan Zhuang. Maybe it was because he was bored, or maybe he thought he was omniscient. To answer, of course, the people who came to ask questions with things in their hands were not ordinary people. Unfortunately, this all-knowing man in ganghood was not an ordinary person either. Almost no one could defeat him. Every time he came, he would come and leave proudly. When Chu Qingyan saw his name on the list, she was very excited. She did not know the all-knowing scholar of Jianghu, but she had heard of his name. It was a pity that he had not appeared in Jianghu for many years. Now that she could meet him, it was a blessing. However, seeing him did not mean that she could successfully ask him about the whereabouts of the ice crystal flower and the love grass. At this time, the customs agent had already opened the box. Isn't this an ordinary woman's headdress? Why do you even dare to take this out? One of the onlookers chuckled. Brother, you can't underestimate this thing. Maybe there's something mysterious about it. Another onlooker said. Chu Qingyan looked at the golden peony seriously. How could the person who appeared in this place take out something ordinary? I think it's very likely to be a hidden weapon. Chu Qingyan whispered to Higashio Motetsu. Higashio Motetsu glanced at the box and chuckled at her. Little girl, your eyesight is not bad. Chu Qingyan shrugged. After watching so many ancient martial arts dramas, she had seen this kind of hidden weapon most often. However, she was not good enough to know what it was used for. She wanted to hear what this all-knowing scholar of Jianghu had to say. The all-knowing scholar of Jianghu, who was wearing a fox mask, looked at it casually. In the quiet room, she heard him sneer. His gaze fell on the customs agent, and his voice was as charming as aged wine. How dare you show such a thing in front of me? Chu Qingyan was stunned. This voice sounded like pearls and jade falling on a plate. It was not low, nor was it extravagant. It carried a gentle breeze. Most importantly, he was very young, probably about the same age as Big Ice Cube. Chu Qingyan sighed. How could people still live? People of this age in the modern world were probably still ignorant. People in the ancient world were really precocious. Fortunately, she had transmigrated into Sure Sui's body. At least she had a higher starting point than others. The customs agent's veins bulged as he held the box. He snorted. All-knowing scholar of Jianghu, don't be too proud. Solve the problem. The all-knowing scholar of Jianghu didn't waste time talking nonsense with him. He didn't look at the box again. He slowly said, "The twining branch hair is ranked 3rd among the hidden weapons. There are 120 petals on it. Press the red dot in the stamen to activate a mechanism. When 100 petals are released, it can become a killing weapon. The petals contain love-severing poison. Even if the petals don't kill the target, the poison can still kill the target on the spot." When the all-knowing scholar of Jianghu said the name, the customs agent couldn't help but take a step back. His turbid eyes were filled with disbelief. Everyone knew that the all-knowing scholar of Jianghu was right. Okay, next one. The all-knowing scholar of Jianghu didn't ask whether the answer was correct or not. He leaned against the pillar behind him and waved his hand impatiently. All-knowing scholar of Jianghu, you can't do this. I beg you, tell me where he is. I want to take revenge on him. I'll send you the twining branch hair. Tell me. The customs agent couldn't accept the result. He lost control and knelt on the ground with a thud. He sincerely offered the box in his hand to the all-knowing scholar of Jianghu. You lost. The loser has no right to negotiate. Besides, the all-knowing sect has plenty of these hidden weapons. He picked his ear and said disdainfully, his wife played with these things all day long. He could pick one up wherever he went. It was better not to bring it back, in case he didn't have a place to put it. Seeing the all-knowing scholar of Jianghu's indifference, the dealer stood up and wanted to use violence. However, he was stopped by the Blue Manor's men in black. They turned around and wanted to take him away. All-knowing scholar of Jianghu, you're cold and heartless. Be careful of retribution. The dealer roared angrily and was quickly taken away. Chu Qingyan happened to be standing at the edge. She inadvertently heard the clear voice talking to himself. She chuckled and said, "What is retribution? Can it be eaten?" Chapter 426. Chu Qingyan subconsciously looked at by Xiao. The mask covered his face, and the wide snow-colored cloak covered his entire body. She could not see his figure, and his attire covered him completely. Apart from his slender and beautiful hands, as well as his bottomless eyes, which were as clear as an ancient pond. From a feeling he gave off, Chu Qingyan felt that he was like an older brother next door. His voice made people feel comfortable, but when he spoke, he was nonchalant and had a heartless smile on his face. It was as if he was someone who was playing with everyone in the palm of his hand, but did not care about them at all. A person like this, from afar, would make people feel close to him. However, once you really got close to him, you would be doomed. Just now, he was laughing and talking coldly to that trader. Chu Qingyan knew that such a person was not easy to get close to. At this time, a new trader came forward. "By Xiao, this is my new toy. Take a look." The trader was wearing a Luosha mask. He spoke with a rich and overbearing voice, unlike the previous trader who lacked qi. On the contrary, there was a bit of killing intent. As he spoke, he opened his hand. A blue crystal appeared in his hand. The candlelight in the room was strong. The crystal reflected a dazzling brilliance in the firelight. The onlookers let out a lot of exclamations. Hearing everyone's exclamations, that Luosha trader couldn't help but show some pride. Chu Qingyan looked at it from afar. It was a bit like the heart of the ocean she saw on TV. But this was ancient times. There were many strange things of every description. She felt that it could be something else. That toy looks good. Even the experienced and knowledgeable Higashio Motetsu couldn't help but take a few more glances. Chu Qingyan nodded. This trip could be considered to have broadened her horizons. You know, I don't know. This kind of thing is more suitable for you girls. This young master doesn't study this kind of thing. Higashio Motetsu said matter-of-factly. TSK, you don't know, so you're looking for an excuse. Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart. What's the big deal even if you admit it? You're just concerned about your face. However, Chu Qingyan's mind was focused on the debate in front of her. She didn't know if it was just her imagination, but she felt that when the Russian trader took out the item, Bai Xiaoxing's eyes flashed with disdain. But when she took a closer look, his eyes had already returned to normal. You don't seem to understand the rules of our palace, Bai Xiaoxing said. What do you mean? The Russian trader frowned and asked unhappily. Bai Xiaoxing looked at him and chuckled. I only accept challenges. I don't answer people's questions. As soon as these words came out, everyone was confused. What do you mean? Chu Qingyan was puzzled. Higashio Motetsu smiled. This trader probably doesn't even know what he has in his hands. He just wants to use by Xiaosheng to find out the origin of this thing. Chu Qingyan nodded. It was no wonder that Bai Xiaosheng had such an expression just now. This person was obviously here to take advantage of the situation. He had no intention of making things difficult for Bai Xiaosheng in the first place. He just wanted to take advantage of the situation to achieve his own goals. Higashio Motetsu's voice wasn't loud, but he didn't deliberately lower it. The traders around him could all hear him. Those people cast disdainful looks at the Russian trader. How despicable! The Russian trader also heard it. He turned around and glared at Higashio Motetsu and Chu Qingyan. Then he stubbornly said to Bai Xiaosheng, "How do you know that I don't know what this thing is? Are you afraid that you'll lose? Is that why you deliberately said such things to confuse the public?" Bai Xiaosheng, I didn't expect you to be a sore loser. How shameless. Scammers like you are the ones who are shameless. Bai Xiaosheng's voice was neither fast nor slow. He wasn't affected by the other party at all. Then he continued, "Since you want to lose so badly, it's not impossible." The Russian trader's eyes lit up. Unfortunately, when Bai Xiaosheng said the last words, he suddenly panicked. "For the sake of fairness, you write down the information you have about this crystal stone on a piece of paper. After you've written it, this highness will tell you. If it matches what you wrote, then this highness will admit defeat. But if you're trying to fool this highness, what compensation should I get from you?" Bai Xiaosheng glanced at the Russian trader and suddenly smiled. "This highness thinks that your eyes are not bad. It'll be fun to gouge them out and play with them." When such bloody words were spoken, the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. Chu Qingyan felt a chill run down her spine. This person didn't say anything, but when he did, it was shocking. Do you know how the top 10 experts by his side came about? Higashio Motetsu felt her back stiffen and couldn't help but want to tease her. Chu Qingyan looked up at him with a puzzled expression. How did they come about? They all lost to him or had something to ask of him. After the transaction, their tongues were cut off and they stayed by his side as slaves or maids for the rest of their lives. Higashio Motetsu said word by word. He wasn't surprised to see the fear in the little girl's eyes. He shook his head. The little girl had courage, but she didn't have enough experience. She still needed to work harder. However, Higashio Motetsu somewhat underestimated her. Her fear only lasted for a moment. Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes at the person who was talking cheerfully in front of her. He didn't treat people as humans. This kind of person was really scary. However, the strong preyed on the weak and the survival of the fittest. This was the law of survival in this world. The Russian trader pointed at him, but couldn't say anything. It was unknown whether he was angry or scared, or both. Do you want to bet or not? If you dawdle any longer, the transaction will be over. Bai Xiaosheng said in a bored tone. As soon as he finished speaking, the onlookers also started to stir. There were many people who wanted to bet with Bai Xiaosheng. They couldn't delay time because of this person. Bai Xiaosheng, how did you know that I don't know the details of this crystal? The Russian trader had already given up. However, he was still unwilling to give up and finally struggled to ask. This kind of crystal can't come into contact with the human body. Otherwise, it will lose its luster. Bai Xiaosheng didn't say too much. The Russian trader cupped his hands in salute. Thank you for your advice. Then he retreated dejectedly. At this time, the crowd gathered again, wanting to trade with Bai Xiaosheng. But this time, Bai Xiaosheng unexpectedly raised his hand. Although he didn't say anything, the crowd automatically quieted down. This should be the innate majesty of a person in power. Even if his figure was casual and his movements were careless, the crowd still looked up to him. Today, I'm tired. Next, I'll only accept the challenge of 3 people. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd of onlookers started to stir. We're all here for you. How can you change the rules so casually? One person angrily asked. The stall owner set up in blue manner had to stay until the end of the transaction unless someone's item was successfully traded. Chu Qingyan also felt somewhat indignant. He really didn't play by the rules. Because I'm willful. Bai Xiaosheng smiled calmly. Chapter 427. Chu Qingyin felt that the word willful was enough to shut so many people out. She felt uncomfortable hearing it. Moreover, there were so many people present. Basically, they were all here to challenge Bai Xiaosheng and ask for an exchange. Chu Qingyin clenched her fists. She was a little anxious. Just now, she was lining up. No matter what, it would be her turn. Now, it had become 1,000 soldiers crossing a single log bridge. The news was not far from her. In the blink of an eye, a mountain was in front of her. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't angry. There are so many people here. How do you choose? In the midst of the noisy crowd, Higashio Motetsu's voice was like bamboo shoots after the rain. It suddenly parted the clouds and made everyone quiet down. Bai Xiaosheng pondered for a moment. Then, he chuckled and said, "How about this? If each of you raises a question to my satisfaction, you will become one of the 3 people. What is considered to be to your satisfaction?" A trader suppressed his anger and said, "Those who could come here were either rich or noble. Well, had they ever suffered such humiliation? It was like buying vegetables in a market, and they had become cabbages that could be chosen by others. How could they not be angry? But at this time, they had to ask for help. They could only swallow their anger. This is a good question. Otherwise, one of the questions can stump me." Bai Xiaosheng said very casually, but this sentence easily aroused the anger of the crowd. "Bai Xiaosheng, there's nothing you don't know, nothing you don't know. How can our questions be difficult for you? Are you deliberately trying to avoid the competition? Is that why you came up with such a trick?" Trader A was furious. "Yes. Are you worried that you won't be able to see the details of the thing later and it will damage your reputation? If you admit it, we won't make things difficult for you." Trader B said aggressively. Listening to his voice, one could tell that he was really angry. Everyone criticized him one after another, but it didn't affect Bai Xiaosheng at all. He leaned leisurely on the pillar, his eyes half closed, as if he was about to fall asleep. "If you have the strength to argue, why don't you use your brain to think before I change my mind? You only have the time to drink a cup of tea left. Otherwise, none of you will have a chance." Those who had come with hope retracted their accusing hands. The all-knowing man in ganghood had an eccentric personality and was hard to fathom. His reputation had long been on par with his. If he really left, they would lose more than they gained. Thus, everyone had no choice but to compromise. At this time, the black-clothed man from the Blue Manor had already placed the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table and had the participants write down their questions. Chu Qingyin took a deep look at Bai Xiaosheng, who had already closed his eyes to rest. She had to admit that he was very impressive to be able to do this with just words. She suddenly understood a principle. Only if you were strong enough would you not be trampled on by others. The so-called strength did not only lie in one's status and authority, but also in one's wisdom and brain power. She lowered her head and fiercely clenched her fists. Then, she took the brush from the black-clothed man's hands. At this moment, she was not in the mood to admire this brush that could be lower than a normal person's lifetime income. Instead, she turned around and walked towards an empty table. "Do you need this young master's help?" Higashio Motetsu pressed down on her shoulder and smiled seductively. Chu Qingyin heard his words and met his unfathomable smile. "Are you trying to say that one condition in exchange for one question?" Higashio Motetsu was stunned. He had not thought of this, but since the little girl had brought it up, then he would do it in passing. It was not bad to have one more condition. He had a premonition that these conditions would be useful in the future. He nodded generously. "The one who knows me best is the little girl." Chu Qingyin brushed his hand away in annoyance and rolled her eyes at him. "Then there is no need to trouble young Master Dongting. I will rely on myself." Higashio Motetsu was not angry. In fact, he also wanted to know how the little fellow would deal with this situation. He did not want the person he valued to hide under someone else's umbrella. Although the participants were resentful, most of them chose to swallow their anger and took the pen and paper. Even if they knew that they would not be selected, they still wanted to give a try. Chu Qingyin pursed her lips and felt an unprecedented pressure. However, she was not in a hurry to write. Instead, she analyzed by Xiao. He knew astronomy and geography, and he also had an intelligence network to help him collect information. He should know some of the common things or the secrets of the aristocrats. Then, what could he not know? Now, it seemed that she could only rely on luck and intelligence. She did not believe that she, a modern person, could not beat an ancient person. Higashio Motetsu, who had taken a seat, looked at her with her head lowered in contemplation. He did not disturb her. Although she had rejected him, he did not know why, but he had a premonition that this little girl would not let him down. Soon, the time was up. Because the real identity of the participants could not be revealed during the transaction. In order to prevent someone from impersonating them, they had to submit the paper in person. After Chu Qingyin finished writing, basically everyone had finished writing and lined up. Unfortunately, she was the last one. She stood up and looked at the idle Higashio Motetsu. She was somewhat puzzled. Don't you want to give it a try? This young master has nothing to ask for. Higashio Motetsu's answer was very annoying. Chu Qingyin spread her hands and did not force him. There were a lot of people, 30 to 40 people lined up, but it was useless to have more people. They could not withstand by Xiaoxing's elimination. She did not know if these people's questions were too superficial or if Bai Xiaoxing was really too powerful. After one round, more than half of the people had already been eliminated. She saw those who were eliminated standing to the side in a daze. Some left in despair. Some wanted to wait until the end to see who would have the last laugh. They probably had the mentality of watching Bai Xiaoxing make a fool of himself. After half a cup of tea's time had passed, there were only 3 people left from the dozens of people. Bai Xiaoxing chuckled with a trace of sarcasm and said regretfully, "Is there not even a single question that this king agrees with?" This naked mockery made many people gnash their teeth. Chu Qingyin, who was standing at the end of the line, laughed softly. "Young man, some words should not be said so confidently. Otherwise it would be a slap in the face. You still want to match this king's couplet? I have to say, this first line is barely passable." Bai Xiaoxing said, and with a stroke of his pen, he matched the second line and casually handed it to that person. That person took a look at it, sighed, and walked away. The second last person. Magic, page 133, line 5. The second character is Bai Xiaoxing said without any pressure. Chu Qingyin glanced at him. He could even answer this kind of question. As expected, his ability was not to be underestimated. Only Chu Qingyin was left. When those who had been defeated saw that there was only a young boy left, they could not help but shake their heads. It seemed that they would not be able to see Bai Xiaoxing suffer today. When Bai Xiaoxing saw her in the crowd, he only felt that such a young person was surprisingly calm. Now that he saw her in the line, although he was surprised, he treated her equally. He casually took the paper that Chu Qingyin handed to him. After opening it, he was stunned. Chapter 428. Bai Xiaoxing's expression caught many people's attention. They stopped in their tracks and gathered around him curiously. Bai Xiaoxing was astonished when he opened the paper. He had been stumped by many questions over the years, but this was the first time he had ever stumped someone as young as her. Although he believed that there would always be someone better than him, he still found it hard to accept. Did you come up with this question? Bai Xiaoxing felt that he would lose face if he was stumped by this young girl. Who was Bai Xiaoxing? He was a person who was never willing to talk nonsense with others. It was simply too surprising for him to suddenly ask such a question. When Chu Qingyin saw the change in his expression, she knew that her question had successfully stumped him. She didn't deny it. Yes. Can you answer it or not? Chu Qingyin's crisp words shocked everyone, including Bai Xiaoxing. Because she was a girl, people who stood at a higher position were more deeply rooted in male chauvinism. No one had expected that the person who stumped Bai Xiaoxing was a girl who looked like she was in her early teens. Chu Qingyin didn't pay attention to the speculative and inquisitive gazes cast at her. She looked straight at Bai Xiaoxing and waited for his answer. She had forgotten to take the voice-changing pill that Yin Luo had prepared for her when she went out today. But that didn't matter. What mattered to her was the result. Bai Xiaoxing lowered his head and looked at the paper in his hand. He frowned and didn't say a word. Dongting Wang Yu, who was standing at the side, saw this and couldn't help but look at Chu Qingyan intently. He didn't see what the lass had written earlier, but he was curious now. Higashio Motetsu wasn't the only one who was curious. Many people present were also intrigued. They also wanted to see if they could answer the male protagonist by Xiaosheng's question. By Xiaosheng, what's written on the paper? Read it out. A curious trader raised his voice and asked. Bai Xiaosheng put the paper on the table. Someone took it and read aloud. In this world, which came first, the chicken or the egg? When that person read it out loud, he was also a little stunned. This question was too tricky. Of course, the chicken comes first. Without the chicken, where would the eggs come from? One of the onlookers blurted out, but he felt that something was wrong. Brother, how can there be a chicken without eggs? Another person patted his shoulder and shook his head. Then which came first, the chicken or the egg? A doubtful voice sounded, asking the question that was on everyone's mind. Therefore, everyone shifted their gazes to Bai Xiaosheng, hoping that this knowledgeable person would be able to answer their questions. When Higashio Motetsu learned of the question, he looked at Chu Qingyan in surprise. This question would make people fall into an endless loop. It was a difficult problem to solve. However, at this moment, Bai Xiaosheng was at his wit's end. Although he was arrogant, he was also a person who was willing to accept his loss. If he knew, he knew. If he didn't know, he didn't know. Little girl, what's the answer? When this question came out, everyone immediately turned their gazes to Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan didn't answer him, but asked seriously, You don't know the answer, right? I succeeded, didn't I? Bai Xiaosheng raised his eyebrows and nodded noncommittally. That's right. I can't answer this question of yours. You win. Chu Qingyan nodded. Then I have a chance to make a deal with you. Bai Xiaosheng nodded. You will be the only person who can make a deal with me. Chu Qingyan breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but make a peace sign to Higashio Motetsu. Although Higashio Motetsu didn't know the meaning of her gesture, when he saw her eyes curl up, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. Little girl, you've already got a chance. Now, please answer our questions. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The onlookers were a little anxious. Curiosity killed the cat. Chu Qingyan smiled slyly. From a biological point of view, I also don't know if the chicken or the egg came first. This question is still a riddle to this day. What? Bai Xiaosheng frowned and looked at her. At this moment, there were other people who were jealous of Chu Qingyan for getting this opportunity who were standing by the side and speaking out in dissatisfaction. Little girl, you didn't abide by the rules. How can you ask a question that even you don't know the answer to? The last person was disqualified because of this. That's right, that's right. Bai Xiaosheng, she doesn't have a right to make a deal with you. That's right, she broke the rules. With so many people criticizing her, he was worried that she wouldn't be able to take it. Higashio Motetsu walked to Chu Qingyan's side in displeasure, intending to speak up for her. But when he saw that she had her hands behind her back and he couldn't see her expression, he shut his mouth. He was a little surprised, but he was also relieved. Today's little girl was already enough to surprise him, but he was still looking forward to the surprises that she would create. After waiting for everyone to finish speaking, Chu Qingyan met Bai Xiaosheng's probing gaze and smiled brightly. This little girl knows the rules of your trade, but in the rules of the game just now, your distinguished self didn't state that you can't ask questions that you don't have an answer to. So this little girl didn't break the rules. You're obviously twisting words and forcing logic. By Xiaosheng, the rules have been there for so many years. Do you still need to state it again? Interesting. Bai Xiaosheng nodded slightly. There was a smile in his voice, but no one knew what the meaning of his smile was. He didn't state this rule that everyone knew, so she took advantage of this loophole. He could only say that this little girl was quite quick-witted. Seeing Bai Xiaosheng's attitude, it was obvious that he had tacitly agreed with Chu Qingyan's words. One was willing to hit, while the other was willing to be hit. What position did these bystanders have to speak up? They could only look on helplessly as Chu Qingyan got the opportunity. Then, little girl, take out the things you want to trade. Bai Xiaosheng didn't waste any time and got straight to the point. Chu Qingyin also had the same intention. She took out the bundle on her shoulder and opened it on the table. The people who were about to leave had already gathered around, surrounding Chu Qingyin and Bai Xiaosheng in a circle. The scene just now had already made everyone curious. They guessed that if this person could make things difficult for Bai Xiaosheng, then she would take out something that could make things difficult for him again. However, the people present were divided into 3 factions. One faction didn't get the opportunity, so they were dissatisfied. They hoped that Chu Qingyin's things wouldn't make things difficult for Bai Xiaosheng, so they left in disappointment. This was the mentality that if I die, you die, everyone will die together. The other faction had been suppressed by Bai Xiaosheng many times, so they hoped that someone would be able to dampen Bai Xiaosheng's spirit. This was the mentality that they wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. The other faction didn't care if it had nothing to do with them. In any case, they didn't mind too much trouble and just wanted to join the fun. Chu Qingyin didn't care what these people were thinking. She took out a small cloth bundle from the bundle and carefully opened it. This thing of hers would blind their titanium alloy eyes. Chapter 429. In view of her question, Bai Xiaosheng was also a little curious about her item. But more than that, he wanted to wash away his shame. He could allow himself to be defeated by one person, but he couldn't allow himself to be defeated by the same person twice. Because he, Bai Xiaosheng, also had a backbone, and he didn't believe that there was anything in this world that he didn't know. Unfortunately, when he saw the item Chu Qingyin took out, he felt that his backbone was about to be deflated. What the hell was this? His only reason at this time collapsed. When Chu Qingyin showed the item in her hand, it was no surprise that everyone was sluggish and puzzled. She had already expected this reaction. She put the item on the table in front of Bai Xiaosheng and smiled cutely. Please take a look. This little girl is not in a hurry to answer. Listening to this tone, it was obvious that she had a card up her sleeve. Unfortunately, he couldn't refute anything, because this thing was indeed unfamiliar to him. This thing seemed to be made of bamboo and transparent agate. A bamboo tube, as thick as an adult man's arm, was used as a side, and inside it was a transparent lens. A 1-foot-long bamboo pole, as thick as a little finger, was used as a handle to hold it. Bai Xiaosheng observed it for a moment, and then reached out to hold the bamboo pole. He first looked at the appearance, and he had to say that the shape was very strange. It was the first time he had seen this kind of thing. The people on the side saw Bai Xiaosheng's careful observation and were somewhat impatient. The people who spoke were traders who had the mentality of I die, you die together. I say, little girl, you can't just take out something to fool people, right? The people with such mentality immediately echoed, and even told Bai Xiaosheng to ignore her. But the traders who had the mentality of adding insult to injury also chimed in. Don't talk nonsense, the world is big. There are all kinds of strange things. Maybe Bai Xiaosheng doesn't know what this thing is. The people with such mentality immediately echoed, and also told Chu Qingyin to ignore these villains. Just when the 2 factions were about to clash, the 3rd faction, who didn't mind more trouble and just wanted to join in the fun, continued to watch the show from the side. One person with sharp eyes noticed that Bai Xiaosheng suddenly pointed his hand at that thing. Bai Xiaosheng held that thing, but couldn't see anything special. But when he looked down through the mirror, he suddenly saw that the cloth bag on the table was enlarged in an instant. He was somewhat inconceivable, and tried to put his hand under the mirror. He found that the finger in the mirror was as thick as a stick. He was simply shocked. And this scene was also seen by the people on the side, and they all cried out in surprise. Someone immediately brought a piece of paper and let Bai Xiaosheng the changes, those densely packed, those small words, they were instantly enlarged, of course of those words, and even the vertical and horizontal. What is this thing? Everyone's heart. Chu Qingyin stood at the side and did not interfere with their practice. Her small face under the mask was smiling brightly and adorably. This thing had never appeared in this dynasty before. Even if they racked their brains, they would not be able to think of anything. So she wasn't worried at all. And Higashio Motetsu was already full of questions when the thing was taken out. He calmly observed everyone's actions and found that this little thing was quite mysterious. After he exclaimed in surprise, he He shook his head at Chu Qingyan with a smile. Little girl, I couldn't tell that you really had such a rare treasure. Don't look down on people. It'll be so bright that you'll be blinded in minutes. Chu Qingyan was in a good mood, and the tone of her voice was much more relaxed. Higashio Motetsu saw that she was so confident and couldn't help but smile. He really didn't misjudge her. Little girl, this one has never seen this thing before, and also doesn't recognize it. Bai Xiaoxing finished sizing it up and put it down. He didn't refuse, directly admitting it, and there wasn't any displeasure in his voice. She liked this kind of personality, straightforward. You let me win, you let me win. Chu Qingyan cupped her hands, her eyes smiling. Little girl, please reveal the mystery. But this lore will remind you, if you don't know the details of this thing, then this transaction is not valid. Bai Xiaoxing said with his hands clasped behind his back. We saw the thing just now. He knew that it wasn't within his scope of knowledge, but he didn't directly admit it. Instead, he picked it up to examine it, and his heart was still very curious about it. So at this time, he hoped that this little girl could give him a satisfactory answer and not be opportunistic. How long has it been since he met a worthy opponent? So don't disappoint him. Bai Xiaoxing's words caused everyone's whispers to fade away. The room was filled with people, and it was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard. Some people hoped that Chu Qingyan didn't know. Some people were anxious for Chu Qingyan to explain, and some people were still watching the play. But no matter what the others thought, it had nothing to do with her. Her purpose in coming to the Blue Manor had always been very clear, and no one could stop her. Chu Qingyan picked up the thing and spoke with assurance. This thing is called a magnifying glass, and it has two functions. The first is to be able to magnify the image, which everyone should have experienced just now. For example, if you can't see a small word, you can use this magnifying glass to magnify the word, or you can use lines and so on. After Chu Qingyan finished speaking, everyone was confused by the three words magnifying glass. But after hearing her explanation, everyone more or less understood. What's the second function? Bai Xiaoxing repeated the three words in his mouth, then asked. Chu Qingyan continued. The second function is to be able to gather light to make a fire. Everyone has heard of drilling wood to make a fire, so this magnifying glass also has this ability. As long as you put a piece of paper or dried leaves on the ground and point the magnifying glass at the sun, it will gather light on the paper, and after a while, it will be able to ignite. Little girl, you're deceiving people. There's no sunlight here, so how can we verify that what you're saying is true? The traders, who had the mentality of if we die, you die, we die together, began to fire again. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. It was true that this point couldn't be tested here. She played with the magnifying glass in her hand and smiled innocently. The geographical conditions are limited, so I can't demonstrate it to everyone. I can only leave it to everyone's opinions. I believe you. Bai Xiaoxing ignored everyone's opinions and said indifferently. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows and smiled. You're not afraid that I'm lying to you? This lord has seen the surface of the mirror just now, so you don't have to doubt this lord's ability. Bai Xiaoxing replied concisely. Everyone fell silent when they heard this. Although Bai Xiaoxing was arrogant, he had the ability to back it up. Moreover, what he disdained the most was lying. Otherwise, how could the all-knowing sect have been able to stand tall for so many years? It was because the all-knowing sect's only rule was honesty. This little girl admires your excellency's ability. Chu Qingyan admired his attitude. There's no need to flatter this lord. You've already defeated this lord, so you can write down what you want to know. Bai Xiaoxing waved his hand and ordered someone to bring over a brush, ink, and paper. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.